on YouTube, so there could be lots of people watching there too.
Admit all.
Hello and welcome everybody to the third and final networking conference organised by Connect for Creativity. We've got a really exciting programme of events for you today, and Connect for Creativity, if you haven't had a look at their website, will definitely put you in the mood. They've got lots of links on there for you to have a look at. And it's an 18-month project led by the British Council in collaboration with Atola and Abdul Gül University in Turkey, BIOS in Greece and Nova Iskra in Serbia. We've got fantastic people lined up for you, not to mention our keynote speaker, Robert Henke, who is waiting in the wings. So do introduce yourself in the chat. If you're here waiting with us, just whilst a few more people join us. We'd like to know which city you are in. We want to know who you are and what you do, very briefly. And I'd be interested to see you just tap into the chat pieces of work that have inspired you. That's what I'd like you to share today as a little starter question. Pieces of work, digital work, artists that are making stuff that you think's really something that everybody needs to be watching and having a look at, or links that people can click on and have a look at interesting work that's being made at the moment, whether that's music, installation pieces, design work. Stick it in the chat so that everybody can benefit from that. We've got about 300 people from 26 countries in 66 cities connecting to this conference. So that's pretty exciting. So we're interested in your conversations. You're going to be the ones asking questions. If you have a question at any point, please put it in capital letters in the chat so we can discern it from everything else in the Zoom meeting. Let us know what's resonating with you. Let us know what you're thinking about, what isn't resonating, things you're really passionate about, and questions, of course, that you've got for our speakers as we go. We'll try and take as many of those as we can at different points in the morning. So we're just a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, we're in a Zoom room. Speaker buttons, gallery buttons at the top right. You can click on those to change your view at any time. It's going out live on YouTube, so you can watch it, catch up at other times. Please feel free to keep your camera on or off. Get up, stretch, get a glass of water, cup of coffee, be comfortable. And if you haven't registered for one of the workshops this afternoon, there is still space. It's on a first come, first serve basis. You just need to let the team know which workshop you'd like to attend. And I think you probably do that in the chat. If you don't, then there'll be a link up. I'm sure the admin team will be putting a link up in the chat showing you how that you can register for the workshops. So it's time for me to introduce Robert Henke, composer, artist and software designer extraordinaire, pioneering surround sound and wave field synthesis, renowned for his legendary work, his installation pieces, electronic music, combining sound, algorithms and laser technology, not to mention his contribution to the industry as one of the main creators of Ableton Live. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. This is going to be pretty informal because, I mean, the topic is how digital is changing the way we relate to each other. And the topic of my talk is how technical processes shape artistic results. And I had major technical problems the last 2 days setting up an installation in Hanover. And that kept me from actually doing my preparation work for this talk, which therefore will be very informal, which on the other side kind of nicely fits the current situation. And the fact that we talk about technology and that we cannot meet in person at a festival, but are relying on technology to communicate. And that we got so used to the fact that we are communicating now via Zoom rooms and stuff like this already changed so much of our social habits in so many ways. That is really interesting to see this in the context of technology in general, that suddenly something that is very non-technological, very biological, has such an impact on how we use technology. And also it shows how fragile everything is we take for granted. And so we're living in interesting times for philosophers thinking about technology. The topic of my talk was how a technical process shapes artistic outcome. And I'd like to start with a little bit of history, talking about Monolake, the project which was the first thing I and Gerhard Beles, who later became the CEO of Ableton, did together that was kind of relevant artistically for myself. And so the point with Monolake was that it was a duo, obviously, it was Gerhard and me, and we were jamming in the studio, and we were jamming as our way of expression with technical tools, because we had no intent to release anything in the first place. It was pre-internet, it was pre-SoundCloud and pre-Bandcamp. So the idea that everything you do leads to a finished product was not really the topic. The topic was more using technology to explore things that are interesting for both of us and having fun. And the way this was technically set up was pretty much a studio based around a few synthesizers and drum computers and sequencers. And it was working as a collaborative effort with a kind of a very clear separation of work. So Gerhard did mainly the sequencing, sitting on the computer and typing in numbers. And I was doing the mixing and the sound design and the effects. And so in order to turn this momentary expression and joy into something that could be conserved later, we had to have some means of recording. And the medium of choice at this time was called digital audio tape DAT. This is something no one knows anymore. This is this little small cassettes. And so what you did is you just hit record on the DAT recorder and recorded a 1-hour jam. And afterwards, the only way to make sense out of this in terms of making a piece of music out of it was taking the stereo recording and editing it. And at this time, editing on a computer was still expensive. And we had access to the electronic studio of the Technical University, where we at night secretly did this. And the resulting composition was pretty much a result of this technical process of improvising very long for hours, recording it and editing it down. So the technology had a clear impact on the result. And it is also interesting to note which absence of technology also had an impact. It just happened that we neither had an 808 or 909 drum machine or any of the iconic Roland drum computers at this time, which meant that our music was lacking those sounds, which meant the music was different. And it was not intentionally different. It was just different because of the tools we used. And since we never anticipated that we would make anything that would be related to a techno context, we never saw us in this, we didn't bother. And it was other people who contextualized what we were doing in this framework of Basic Channel and the Hardwax people and everyone else who just happened to be our friends. So the studio collaboration was a basically real-time jam that had to be edited down to non-real-time to a finished product later. And this is something which I find very important when we think about the process of music making as a technological process. Before the invention of recordings, music was basically real-time. And there was no difference between performing music and experiencing music. The only way to experiencing music was a performance. And suddenly recording got invented and everything got much more complicated, because nowadays we have a situation where most electronic music is created in a non-real-time fashion. I would say probably 99%. And that means if something like this has to be brought on stage, you have to do something different. You cannot just perform the same thing that you do in a studio on stage. And this was an interesting experience that shaped also the the way Gerhard and me were thinking about music, because at some point there was a demand. So friends asked if we want to perform our music in their backyard or basement club or whatever was available in Berlin at this time. So we just brought the studio basically into the club, which means a lot of that stuff just went into a car and got set up in a club. But what we could not do, of course, in real time was all the editing, which basically shaped the pieces into the final pieces. And that meant that what you could experience in such a live situation was this endless jam. And this was pretty much the type of music that came out of it. Sometimes we had good luck, and this jam was, let's say, to 30%, 40% good. So people who experienced 1 hour of Monolake live could experience maybe 20 minutes where actually something meaningful happened. There were other moments where the outcome of what we did was much less. And of course, this was an unsatisfying situation. But the technology we had on hand at this time pretty much made nothing else possible. And at some point in this history, around 1997 or 1998, Gerhard decided that after finishing his university, that founding his own company would be his main interest. And I joined this company, more about that later, but suddenly I was alone. And being alone meant that everything we set up technologically to work as a kind of jam duo situation didn't make sense anymore. Jamming with myself in the studio felt extremely pointless. So I had to adapt the technology to make sense of the new situation. And I started building a sequencer that was much more powerful, more complex, in order to be able to actually perform by myself something with more complexity. And at this time, Apple started to release the first so-called PowerBooks, which were the first laptops which were powerful enough to actually do audio processing on a laptop. And suddenly, everything was very different. Technology enabled me that I could travel with just a laptop and perform as Monolake with a sequencer and a few samplers in one laptop. And that pretty much saved me, or saved the Monolake project. But it also had an effect on the other thing, and this is the thing I'm going to talk about now. This thing here, I need to see my own picture to see if where's me on the screen here. So, Ableton Live, the sequencing instrument, as it has been called at the beginning. The idea to develop a piece of software for live performance came to us pretty natural. Simply because that's the only thing we had experience with. And this was also something that was not existing before. And when we think about how a tool is shaping the result and how the technology is shaping the result, Ableton Live, of course, had a huge impact on how people make music. But there's one thing I was always considering, and this is the fact that if Ableton would not have come up with this kind of idea, like the session view and this idea of real-time performance, someone else would have, because it was an emergent idea. It was an idea that technology was providing and that at some point someone would have done. The interesting thing, if you think about how much software or how much technology changes what we do, is the fact that for very practical reasons, live was very limited at the beginning. We decided when we started to work on live that it only works with audio, simply because having synthesis running on the computer in a massive way would have been impossible back in these days. So live became this thing that worked with sound files, and it worked with quantization, and it worked with the speed grid, and with all these kind of limitations that we had to put in place in order to make it happen. And as a result, the way people make music did pretty much change from this endless flow to a very block kind of thinking, of global quantization, of 1-bar loops, of 2-bar loops. So the benefit of having it all in a computer and the benefit of being able to use a lot of material came with a price. And the price was that instead of having all these instruments where at every instant of time I can turn a knob and change things intuitively, I am limited to a computer screen and to a mouse and to potentially a MIDI controller. And in one way, this is liberating because, yeah, people can travel and can perform their music anywhere with much less effort. But at the same time, this new technology came with its own limitations. How do you deal with that? Well, the usual thing that people did was they added MIDI controllers to make sure that there's still some tactile control. Because we are doing this virtual conference here now, and we're sitting in front of our Zoom screens. And as much as we got used to it, the situation would be different if I would be now in a room with all of you listening here and we could interact. And the same is true for how we interact with software and we interact with old machines, for instance. So what people did is they were using MIDI controllers to control live. And at some point, I decided that I need a bit more of this freedom back that I had back in the days when we had all these machines on stage. So I built one MIDI controller for myself as someone with an engineering background. And this MIDI controller changed very much the way I was thinking about performance. And I'm going to bring it. So some of you who are a bit older might have seen this in real on stage with me. This thing was my attempt to use technology to get something back of a tactile feel to software. And as a matter of fact, it worked pretty well. The reason why I stopped using it was very pragmatic. It is heavy, and it's the only one of its kind existing in the world. And it became too dangerous to travel with it. However, this thing here made it clear that a tactile access to music software is extremely essential for performance. So long story short, a later thing that came out of this idea is this one here, which actually was very successful because this piece of hardware changed the perception of what the tool can do for so many people that we got a lot of users who would never work with software, but they are totally fine working with software if they have hardware access to it. Because at the end of the day, everything is software in one way or the other. And what counts is the access to it. So access is the big topic. And now I need to see what I have here. Yes, an important thing I'd like to mention when it comes to this piece of technology. When you build technology, you have a certain idea in mind what this technology should do and how people are going to use it. But people have different ideas, and people are abusing technology, and this is always part of a creative process. With the invention of the grand piano, the prepared piano was invented too. It was just not the perspective of the first people who built it. And with the invention of nonlinear editing, glitch music and micro editing was invented too. It was not the thinking of the people who built this software, but it became obvious for artists that there's something to gain. And my learning experience with using my gigantic MIDI controller was, it was never intended to be a replacement for looking at the computer screen. My idea was always that I use the MIDI controller as a replacement for the mouse and still look at the screen to get an idea where I am in my set. But after performing for 2 or 3 times with it, I noticed that I don't need to look at the screen. and that I have enough of a kind of a vague memory of where everything is located to be able to perform without looking at the screen. At the same time, this of course always leads to some mistakes because sometimes I remember things wrong. And as a result, I got in this incredibly interesting new dialogue with my own tool where mistakes forced me on stage to react. And I became really hooked to this method of performing where I press a button and I launch a clip without seeing a clip name and without knowing if this is the right one, and only have a structure in place that mildly works as a guideline, and dealing with the fact that everything is happening instantaneously. And this is something that I find very remarkable, that perfection in itself or perfect planning is very often in the way of a creative process. And the tools people use when they try to explore creative things very often are tools that allow to make mistakes, that allow to push things beyond a certain limit and experiencing something that a developer might say is an artifact, is a mistake. But the artist says, yes, but I like it. And so let me see, what else do we have? I have this here. I have this. I like to talk a bit more about the relationship between being possible to do everything on one side and limitations on the other side. I mean, that's a topic I've been talking about in a lot of talks, but I find it very important. So I come from a generation of people where having access to tools was limited, and the ability to have more than one synthesizer was a luxury. And now we have a situation where everyone can use pretty much every technology in their laptops and almost for free. And what I learned from myself, and where I was moving back and forth all the time, was from working within the laptop, having access to a gigantic library of tools, versus working with some hardware, which is limited. And I made several attempts to get rid of all that, because from a theoretical perspective, I can do everything just in my laptop. There is no technical, logical reason why I couldn't. And in fact, 90% of my music, or 95% of my music, finally gets its shape within the laptop. So I don't need all that, but why do I still have it? And the reason why I still have it is that sometimes it helps me focusing if I'm forced to work with something that is limited. These technical limitations make it necessary that I go deep into something, so that I try to find beauty within something that I know very well, and where I try to get the most out of things that are very known. This is a very opposite approach to trying out something new every day. But I feel that this promise of technology, that everything is possible, is something that artistically is not necessarily the best thing to do, because it's highly confusing. And the more I dive into what I'm doing, the more I'm happy with superimposed limitations. And I believe that the challenge these days is that within all these possible scenarios, we can do video, we can do immersive environments, we can do artificial intelligence, we can do neural networks, we can do all sorts of audio processing. Everyone can do everything. There's millions of tools. And how do you find your own creative idea within that? And well, my personal answer is limitations. And this brings me in the last remaining minutes to something that I'm exploring more and more. When I started to work on visual things, I started working on visual things mainly because I felt the need to get rid of some random VJ who is projecting stuff when I play live. And instead of playing my own visuals, And at some point, I noticed that there's people doing video that are far more advanced than I could ever be. And this is a skill I don't have. So instead of, I thought I'd take a new media, which has not been explored that much, lasers, and work with them. And the great liberty of working with lasers is that they are so limited. Working with lasers implies there's one beam of light and there's mirrors that move this light very fast. And this is mechanical. And you cannot do incredibly complex shapes. You cannot do incredibly complex things moving. You can only do simple things. And within the simplicity, suddenly very, very general musical elements like timing, rhythm, succession, overall shape becomes important again. And instead of feeling trapped with the simplicity of the medium, I felt a great sense of liberation, because suddenly I was back to asking myself questions about what is it I really want to do? And how can I express this within a very limited set of options? And I believe without my occupation with this very limited medium, I would make different music these days. So there's, again, a feedback loop between being forced to work with something that's very limited and getting ideas out of that that help me navigating through the abundance I have with other media. So in this regard, there's a constant dialogue between limited instruments, limited tools, and an abundance. And by experiencing the limitations of one tool and trying to master a limited tool, you get an idea how to deal with, well, abundance on the other side, because there's a good chance that you get an understanding of what is it you want to express in the first place, and what is personal on your expression. Because that's, at the end of the day, what counts in artistic expression is personality. Everything else comes down to basically creating a demo reel for a tool. And this is why there is still a chance to do something creative with very old tools, because as soon as you inject your own personality into it, it becomes yours. And it doesn't matter if the tool is 2,000 years old or 40 years old or from last year. A new tool or a new technology in itself is not an artistic expression. It's just something that you can use by yourself to become an artistic expression. But the art is in the selection and the usage of the tool, which is, of course, very clear. There is one thing I found interesting when we think about how to use tools for creativity. We seem to all being very focused on creating results, because our society is very result oriented. The idea is you have to release things. I mean, Spotify CEO just made himself a complete fool by telling artists that they have to release more music in order to earn more money, as if the fact of just producing more, like in a factory, is what is the point of artistic creation. And I believe when we talk about technology and about the difficulties to understand technology and master it and work with it, potentially a way of more process-oriented thinking is also interesting. To say, it's not really important what the result is at the end, because when I'm trying to learn a new tool, when I try to express myself within something I found new, then perhaps the real value is not that at the end I put something on SoundCloud or Bandcamp, but the real value is the process. The real value is actually enjoying to learn. And this is something that sometimes seems to get lost in a very result-oriented society. Back in the days when Gerhard and me were making music together, the idea of releasing music was not our motivation. The idea was having fun. And over the years, this got more and more replaced by this idea of, I have to release a record. And now I'm back to a state mentally where I say, well, I can have actually fun in here. And if I, after playing for a while, feel it was not good, then I can just stop it without feeling guilty for not using the technology to create something that stands for eternity. And so this leads me to one last thought, because I see we are already running out of time. Obviously, a big part of what I'm doing is creating instruments. So I create instruments for myself. I create the tools for my laser shows, and I write software for ancient computers to get them doing sound design and video. And I develop instruments for Ableton Live. And I figured out that for me, the process of creating an instrument is as satisfying as actually playing it, because it's an artistic endeavor. And I have a very strong relationship to my old instruments here, because every single of these instruments have been created by human beings. And these human beings were passionate about what they're doing. So Roger Lynn was passionate about building the Lynn drum. Colin Fraser is passionate about building his crazy, complex, inspiring, hard to learn hardware sequencer. And so all these things here are actually results of people being creative with technology. And I use their creativity to become creative by myself. And this is very beautiful, because I'm in a dialogue with whatever these people here came up with. And if I like what these people did, then I get nice results out of it. So it's a collaborative effort. We're using technology in a collaborative effort. We create technology in a collaborative effort. And there is a lot of artistic thinking involved in the creation of technology. And there's some capital questions here. Let's see. You state that human versus machine is actually human versus human. The AI question, yeah, that's a tricky one.
Robert, can you just read, just for those who are not necessarily looking at the chat, the question is...
Sorry. Relia asked, you state that human versus machine is actually human versus human, as we made the machines in the first place. Would you say that this also applies to implications of AI? Should we look at AI as something that is part of us or external, separate? As humans also created AI. AI is a tricky one, I believe, because we create something where we understand the technical process, but ultimately what happens inside the neural network is a black box. And that's the big discussion. For those people who are not really, were listening here and are not really deep into this field, there is something where we throw in data to train this thing. And afterwards, this thing allows us to create results from new data we feed in. So we can train this to recognize this as a coffee mug. And if we do this with 5 million coffee mugs, there's a chance that if we present this machine with a photo, some number comes out of it that says, okay, this is 95% likely something containing coffee. But since we don't know exactly how this result happened, we, for instance, don't know which biases this has. And this thing can't talk to us. If a human being makes a decision, be it an artistic decision, a political decision, whatever, we can always ask, why do you think this is not a coffee pot? And then this person can tell you something. The AI can't. So we can't question the AI, which means indeed we are reaching a gray area here where we build something that we cannot understand anymore. And this is systemic. This is built in. It's the whole point of that we don't understand it. That's why it works. It works because it works on a level that goes beyond what we do and on a different level. And I don't know what implications this has for the arts, but I'm 100% certain it has implications on many other fields. And we need to be very careful to see what happens. but I'm really bad in predicting the future, unfortunately. So
thanks, Robert. It's so interesting hearing you speak, and I think we should just touch on this second question in the chat just before we end, because we are almost out of time. So I'll just read it out, because for the people on YouTube who might be watching,
yes,
won't hear. So it's about musicality. So it's asking, how do you decide? How do you include musicality within person expression via a laptop only? How do you decide whether or not base it on musicality or technical novelty, the work that you're making?
Okay, so there are many questions. The first question is how important musicality is for making electronic music. If I define musicality as an artistic sense for how things have to be, then I would say it's very important, but it is not important to be a trained musician. I think that's the difference. It's important to make judgments. So if you hit 2 or 3 notes on a keyboard and you say, I like this sequence, then no one else can argue about that, because there is no objectivity. And if I can say these 2 objects here in space need to be like this forever in my atelier or studio because it's great the way it is, it's a beautiful sculpture, then other people can say, well, it's in the way if you try to mix. But you can't argue against me saying this is a sculpture here in my studio. There's no rational way to argue that. And so the most important property for an artist is to be decisive, to say, this is what I want to do, and this is great. So how do you include the personal expression via laptop only? Well, I think if you look at this example, if I type 3 sentences on a piece of paper. I mean, this here is my lousy preparation for this talk. It's a few letters on paper. It's done with a laptop. But of course, it's my personal expression. It could be an invoice. It could be a love letter. So I don't think the laptop is the issue. The laptop is the issue when it comes to a haptic interaction with a real-time medium. I can talk here and I can use my voice and I can modulate it and I can express joy, anger, sadness, all these kind of things. It's much more difficult to express the same thing if I'm just typing on a laptop. But when I talk to you here via Zoom and on Skype, on YouTube later, you will notice a personality here. And you will notice a personality much easier than if I would just type in the same thing. So we are about out of time. Okay, well, I guess that's time now to go to the bar at the festival. I don't know if there's a bar here at Zoom.
Oh, thanks, Robert, so much. You've given us so much to think about, and I love how reassuring it is to hear you saying to artists, be decisive, work out what's personal to you, and embrace limitation. Really, really strong things to think about, and fascinating to hear you talk. Thank you so much for your time today, Robert. Will you stay?
It was lovely. Which part will be on YouTube later? You edit out.
It will all be magically worked out by the creative team in Athens. So we'll leave that to them. But thank you very much. Do stay with us. Then if people have got things they want to ask you on the chat, they can.
I can certainly do this on the chat window here.
Thank you, Robert, so much.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure, and I hope it was not too improvised.
It was perfect. It was perfect. So we're now going to move on to a panel discussion, and Katerina Guduli is going to moderate this. The panel discussion is entitled "Artistic Creation and Technology: Who is using who?" Katerina, would you like to take over?
Thank you, Hannah. Hello, everybody, and welcome again. Thank you for joining us for this session, which is part of the Creative Explorations Conference Day 2. I'm Katerina. I will be facilitating this panel, and as Hannah mentioned, the title is Artistic Creation and Technology, Who is Using Who? We're delighted to have 4 great speakers with us today, namely Kaan, Ilan Manoir, Dimitris Haritos, and Poka-Yio, who will talk about their artistic practice and professional practice, exploring different perspectives of art and technology in the digital age. So before we start, I would like to remind you that you can use the chat box to post your questions. Please do so by stating your name and your question in capital letters, and we will have a short Q&A session at the end of all presentations. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Kaan Büyükperver. Kaan is a visual artist and director from Turkey. He creates immersive audiovisual experiences that are embodied in physical and digital spaces. His practice consists of experiments with various media such as virtual and augmented reality, projection mapping, geodesic domes, large-scale displays, and digital fabrication. So Kaan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. All right, so I think I can share my screen. Let's see. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So thank you so much for your invitation. I'm very excited and honored to be a part of this conference with all these great minds. It was great to listen to Robert Tanke. I'm a big fan of him. And I want to thank you to all of our viewers from all around the world joining us today, probably from their homes. So here is normally a 1-hour keynote, but I will try to give you an overview of my work and interests in the next 10 minutes and how I use and how the use of technology helped the evolution of my creative expression. I'm not going to talk about these projects one by one, but you can go read and watch about them, everything you see here on my website. So I prepared this automatic slideshow for the next 100 slides, so hopefully it's going to help, and I'm going to talk over it. So for the last 10 years, I've been working with immersive media and as a visual artist, and my aim was to using these immersive audiovisual works push the boundaries of traditional narratives of art, cinema, and music. So these projects sometimes took place as a large-scale projection installation in public, sometimes within geodesic domes, or a virtual reality headset, or as a 3D printed sculpture. So I really heavily focus on the relationship between the physical and digital media, and one of the great things in our age is a digital content can be displayed in so many different ways. So we can really customize it for different environments, for festivals, museums, galleries, or people can experience the same giant installation in their homes with their virtual reality headsets. And one of the other great things is we are all now, people from different fields are using their computers as their studios and software as their tools. So that allows us to have a wider range of collaborations. So me personally, I've been involved in many different, interdisciplinary collaborations with scientists, architects, musicians, wellness teachers. So I'm always looking forward to expand my, interface with my reality through these kind of interdisciplinary dialogues. And I've experienced with some of these works you see here, how new media can be really powerful to raise public awareness on the vital matters of our time. In general, the way I see the world is, our daily lives are surrounded by digital technologies exponentially, especially in this moment now, it's even more relevant. And we are moving toward living more and more in these digital worlds. And like this conference, our jobs, our emotions, our friendships, our art, everything is more and more happening, performed in these digital environments. So in some cases, this is a cool extension of our lives, but sometimes it's just out of necessity and we're not really choosing this voluntarily, but we don't have any other option to communicate at the moment. So these digital displays we use and look at every day, they are becoming larger and larger, and they're surrounding us more and more with with an endless flow of information. And these are becoming also part of our public spaces and architecture. We see these giant displays everywhere now in our daily lives, in our homes. And we're spending significant amount of time looking at these displays. So it is doing something to us. It is reshaping how our brains are wired. It's shaping our emotions. And soon with the advancements in these augmented reality technologies, this digital interfaces are going to they're going to be overlapped with our normal daily vision. So this is going to be a whole new additional layer of world. I'm some days I'm waking up to a more concerned state of mind about this. Sometimes I'm more optimistic, but the useful thinking for me is understanding, as artists and designers, we have a chance to be the architects, the thinkers of this new space, so we can decide how the communications are going to function in these new digital spaces, how they're going to look like, these digital worlds, what kind of aesthetics, what kind of sounds, colors, all these different type of decisions. We have a lot of initiative in this decision making. While having this kind of responsibility to make these kind of decisions in this digital worlds, my work is heavily inspired by nature, as I assume many of us working on this field. And I view the nature as the greatest generative artwork ever emerged through these software-like fundamental forces and principles that we can observe all around the universe and ecosystems. And as we understand our planet deeper, we see these emergent properties everywhere, and we can learn something from it. We can apply it to our artistic creations or systems we create in order to benefit from the intelligence out there that is already existing outside of the computers, not the artificial one. These processes are the biggest source of inspiration for me. Like I mentioned, I love mimicking those patterns I observe. And I think I see the role of the artists and the use of emerging technologies. These are vital to make these invisible intelligence visible. So in terms of, I have a couple of more minutes, when we think about the main discussion of this conference, how digital changing, how we relate to each other, and with this panel, who's using who, I view this as a mutual evolutionary process where, we shape our tools, then our tools shape us, like Marshall McLuhan put it. And this heavily affected my lifestyle, like working with these kind of media, working in this field. The more time I spend with my computer, the more time I focus on, different ways of creativity using different media. I can feel I've been also, this became a focus for my personal growth as well. Something I discovered with the new media, it gives me more independence or freedom. I can use less physical objects in order to create new work. So this makes me even more independent in my lifestyle. We can be location independent in this world right now, being artists in this field. And something I see, interesting is I have people in this field, who are heavily inspired by the future inventions, and we're trying to prophesize or speculate about how the future may look like through the advancement in technology. We were always speculating, but now we suddenly, with this pandemic, found ourselves in that future where, like I said, involuntarily, we need to start to communicate and live and do our work in these platforms. And I think the artists are kind of pioneers / early adopters of any time a coming future. And I think they've been already living this lifestyle and using these tools, and now a bigger mass population is starting to inherit these tools and communication methods, and hopefully they can take away something creative out of it, and make their mark on this new digital territory in this new world building stage. Thank you. This is my 10 minutes.
Thank you, Kaan, for your short and precise presentation and your inspiring work. So moving on to our next speakers, we'll have time for questions after the end of all presentations. So next one is Ilan Manoir. Ilan is sorry, can you hear me? Yep. Ilan is a multidisciplinary artist with a specific interest in conceptual and post-digital comics. He currently holds a PhD researcher position at the Aalto University in Helsinki, where he examines the intersections of contemporary comics and 21st century technological disruptions. His artistic work claims for the importance of comics as a materially self-reflexive medium, unaffiliated to any general art history. So Ilan, I'm giving you the virtual floor, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Katerina. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So thank you for the invitation. So I would like to speak about the Neural Yorker. It's a project that we have been working on since a few months with a small organization I helped founded in London last year. And I'm going to start speaking about a bit about deep neural networks and how they have helped us shape our concept and our practice in order to reinvent a bit the comics medium and the cartoon medium. So deep neural networks have very recently played a very transformative role in advancing AI across various application domains. Some of the most creative bits of contemporary art are happening today at the junctions between different disciplines and technologies. I would like to present you here this experiment that we have been working on, which involves the automation of cartoons and comics using deep learning and more specifically generative adversarial networks and language models. The running slideshow that I'm going to initiate now is a non-curated collection of our automated Twitter account that you can follow it on twitter.com/neuralyorker. So I'm part of a global community of conceptual comics artists whose goal is to explore comics outside the traditional scope of literary and artistic practices involving text and image. Contrary to many of our colleagues, we feel comfortable experimenting with tools and knowledges coming from post-colonial critique, digital humanities, and network technologies. Our works are located at the crossroads of different media, practices, and sensibilities, and evolve beyond disciplinary, formal, and compartmental media terminology. My ongoing publishing activity investigates comics as objects particularly amenable to programmatic processes. From my early book, Facsimile Appropriation, to the Shape Reader system of communication specifically designed for readers with visual impairment, and the latest experiments based on the orchestrated work of hundreds of comics artists around the globe, each book project can be easily described as a set of instructions. These projects, therefore, in a programmatic fashion similar to the bottom-up algorithmic process of deep learning, express a choice to locate the medium of comics in the widest affect aperture. Similarly, the project I present you today claims for a perpetual becoming of the cartoon medium by furthering estranging the comics object to a machinic, non-human understanding. So I'm here today as a founder of Applied Memetic, an organization that researches the political repercussions of synthetic media and highlights the urgency for a new media-rich internet literacy. The organization is committed in synthesizing graphic narratives, and the last months we have been working toward an ambitious project, the Neural Yorker, trained on a very large collection of cartoons and punchlines. This project comes as a multimodal generative architecture that produces daily cartoons inspired by Twitter's trending hashtags and topics. It is still in its infancy mode and operates in a semi-supervised learning, but the algorithm is gradually set to fit the contemporary industry standards for press cartoons. We are not there yet. As you can see, the graphics are quite raw, but the algorithm is slowly learning its way into the nitty-gritty of the cartoon profession. I consider here important to provide some context for the nature of automation in comics. While speculations about the growing role of machines in artistic production have been a consistent trope in modern contemporary art debates throughout the 20th century, comics, from their early beginnings, have been symbiotically expanding with the development of printing, distribution, communication, and media technologies. These industrial processes of completion, based on the generalized automation, standardization practices, and an orchestrated division of labor, are so embedded in the ways we understand and consume comics that have become an essential feature for the conceptualization of artistic practices in our medium. A typical production line of manga, the Japanese comics, involved dozens of people handling specialized roles in a quasi-tailorist production belt, often in ways that have been criticized for resembling a sweatshop. While distribution has been increasingly involving massively digitized operations of logistics and global supply chains. And this is only about mainstream comics. Comics is an industrial form of expression. At the same time, the comics industry has been quite reticent in embracing the complex nature of technological developments in AI. But this situation, I argue, might soon change. The online abundance of digitized media content, available through third-party groups of comics fans, the increasing convenience of programming language frameworks and machine learning libraries, the secularization of knowledge through e-learning, and the plummeting prices in specialized hardware might contribute to reach a critical point where AI will be gradually integrated in the comics pipeline. Synthetic and generative processes might soon reshape the ways we produce, consume, archive, and distribute comics artifacts. A more wide adoption of AI in different strata of the industry might reconfigure existing readerships and markets. It will ultimately force a radical realignment for the practitioner's artistic ethos and contribute to the formation of new reader sensibilities. Applied Memetic, our organization, acknowledges the full matter-of-factness of the available technological tools, certainly not in terms of a reified glorification based on questions of progress or innovation. At best, a reconfiguration of the industry's entrenched roles of production, which means who is entitled to a set of operations and program routines that do not conventionally account for the production of cartoons, such as web scraping, image classification, computer vision algorithms, active learning, language modeling, indexation, cloud computation, etc. So we are particularly interested in two algorithmic generative architectures, the different types of generative adversarial networks and language transformers. Generative adversarial networks, known as GANs, are one of the most successful image synthesis programming architecture in the past few years. They have the ability to generate novel images by emulating the probability distribution of any given training dataset, as Robert explained in his previous talk. The architecture is based on adversarial training by pitting two or more neural networks against each other. The first network is called the generator. It generates samples that are intended to come from the same probability distribution as the training data. The other network is called the discriminator. It examines the samples to determine whether they are real data coming from the dataset or negative training examples that are used by the first network, the generator. The two networks compete in what is known as unsupervised learning. The generator is trying to fool the discriminator by having it accept the generated data as ground truth. This GAN architecture resembles a zero-sum game, where the model converges when both neural networks reach what is known as a Nash equilibrium, which is a state where the actions of each neural network will stop having any effect on its adversaries. It's a very Marxist dialectical situation. The generated samples will then theoretically be indistinguishable from those that are in the dataset. Or our text, as you can see from this sometimes very strange punchlines, have been developing different language models based on the open source pre-trained model GPT-2 and the data's different texts, as well as custom-made dataset consisting from hundreds of digitized books on humor, cartoons, etc. I'm going to end with a small statement, which I would like to position this project in the literature. Actually, within this computational creativity literature, most papers and academic researchers have proposed different algorithms in the exploration of the creative potential of a machine. In their attempt to replicate a certain view of the evolution and history of the arts, popular models in computational creative systems usually agree in constraining the novelty of their output. Most models seek to reach an equilibrium between the hypothetical spectator's optimal level of potential arousal and the supposedly negative hedonic effect of too much novelty. We differ in that regard. This project is an opportunity for us to explore unconventional processes by weakening the aesthetic predispositions and received knowledge that are reproduced through specific human evolutionary interpretations of comics. Instead, we are interested in harnessing the machinic understanding of comics through recurrent patterns, probability distributions, and outliers in comics language that have been lurking in our pre-attentive reader's cognition and that we haven't been able to articulate in words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilan, for this thought-provoking presentation and your view actually on AI and comics. So moving on to our next speaker, Dimitris Charitos. Dimitris Charitos is an associate professor at the Faculty of Communication and Media Studies and head of the Department of Digital Arts and Cinema at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. He has studied architectural design, computer-aided design, and holds a PhD on interactive design and virtual environment design. Since 1996, he has authored and co-authored more than 90 publications in books, journals, and conference proceedings. And as a new media artist, he has produced electronic music, audiovisual and interactive installations, and virtual environments since 1983. So Dimitris, thank you for being with us, and I give you the virtual floor.
Okay, yeah, okay, I share the screen now. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. I'll talk, thank you firstly for inviting me in this very interesting gathering and collection of presentations. I'd like to talk about two things mainly, which in some ways relate to the theme of the session. One is the interactive artwork that we have just finished and we are awaiting for its opening as soon as the coronavirus allows for it. This is a project called AthSense. It was actually curated by Katerina, who I thank very much for this. And it's actually a interactive installation which is getting input from urban data. We have installed a series of sensors in, let me just show the team of the people who worked on this project. The names were at the beginning, and if you check the athsense.gr website, you will find all the details and the credits. And this was conducted in the context of the Polis 2 interventions in the city project of the municipality of Athens, funded by this and installed at the Serafio building, where you can very soon go and see it and enjoy it. Mainly what we try to do here is to use urban data, which we capture from a series of sensors installed in two areas of the environment of central Athens. And we somehow translate this data to different multisensory presentations of content in space, thus creating spatial experiences. I'll very briefly, let me just do that for a moment. I'll very briefly show you the architecture of the work, which shows the central server here, the website that feeds off the server. This is the series of input devices and subjective devices being humans. So we don't only use sensors, but we also allow for the citizens to actually give us feedback about how they feel, where they are, when they are somewhere in the city. This is location-based input that is feeding the installation. And we're trying to capture their feeling about the different sensorial aspects of their experience in the city and general what they feel about their here and now. And all this feeds the 4 parts of the installation, which are very quickly show you here. The first and central part of the installation is a visualization of all the data that we capture, and it's presented in a virtual environment built in Unity, which is interactive by video tracking, and it's projected on a surface. It's not a navigable environment as such, because we wanted it to be an experience for multiple users. So it's placed in an area in the store of the building. And by using video tracking and iSense cameras, we capture movement of the people who are in front of it, and they can move about certain elements of the installation. Second part is the sound and kinetic artwork, which is placed next to this visual aspect of the piece, where we try to translate the environmental measurements, which and also the pollution measurements. We try to translate this into layers of sound, which are projected onto space from 6 speakers, thus creating a certain spatial experience of a sound environment, an auditory environment, through the placement of the sounds in different places of this store. So it's a 6-channel, obviously, sound installation. And then there's these kinetic sculptures, which are moving through the translation of the environmental measurements. And they're generating non-amplified sounds, which are in a dialogue with the computer-produced sounds that are projected in the space from the speakers. So here are some structures that we have used. These are all ready-made, let's say, kinetic sculptures, working a bit like that. Yeah. Well, you can kind of hear that, I guess, very well from Zoom. Anyway, and the third part of the installation is a series of LED matrix displays. These are actually projecting in the space of the Serafio complex the messages that citizens are inputting in the web app that we have built. So asking them how they feel at that very moment, wherever they are. And these are, in a few minutes, projected onto these LED displays. You can see a short video of this. And then the fourth part of the artwork is a light installation where we try to translate the sound levels, the noise levels that we capture in the city center into light in a way that as the noise increases, then light decreases. So it's like the opposite. And then there's this happens here actually, and here in the big where you see the bigger light, this light interacts through the use of a microphone with the visitors who are actually located in the installation space. So there's a bench here that you can sit on and actually speak to this and interact with the light in a very simple, minimal manner. Now, this all is ready with a few small exceptions, and it will be, as soon as we can, we will start to publicize it very soon. And if you visit the website of the project, which is athsense.gr, and I'll write it down in the chat later so you can check it, then you can use the web app easily from there and input your own feeling about where you are at some point in space and time, and feed the installation. Now, do I have 2 or 3 minutes, or I run out of time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
It's enough. It's enough. Last thing I wanted to say, which I think probably relates a bit more to the theme of the discussion, is that I have the pleasure and the honor to be heading a very new department of the National Capitalism University of Athens. I know this is all Greek to you, where you see here in this URL, but it will soon be translated. We're very new, actually. We're entering the 2nd year of our functioning as a department. It's a department of digital arts and cinema. I head this department, and what we are trying to do is that we're trying to educate young students into becoming multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary artists for using digital audiovisual media, as well as let's say high-end digital technologies, which I guess feed each other. That's why the title of the department is Digital Arts and Cinema. We understand that cinema and experimental cinema is a part of the roots of new media art, and also digital arts in the sense that cinema is today digital mostly. So there's a constant dialogue there between these two, let's say, areas of art making. And we are trying to educate students in a manner that is multidisciplinary and experimental. And we hope that very soon we will have interesting results. That is very interesting creative people out there making their own creative first steps. Not much I can say in 2 minutes, but I'm available for further discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dimitris, and we're looking forward to experience actually AthSense in Serafio, and also congrats for the new Department of Digital Media in Greece. Moving on to our last but not least speaker, Poka-Yio. Poka-Yio is an associate professor at the Athens School of Fine Arts, a visual artist, contemporary art curator, strategy consultant for organizations, and personal coach for individuals and business executives. He is founding director of the Athens Biennial and has co-founded the Alpha Station for Contemporary Art in Athens. He has exhibited his work internationally and in Greece, and his practice includes painting, performances, theater, and short films. Poka, are you here? Yep. So welcome, the floor is yours. We can't hear you, you have to unmute. It's on the left corner on your screen.
Hi everyone.
Yeah.
It's good to have so many friends here in the panel and also in the audience. I'm gonna be sharing with you some stuff that I have made. Now, I have to make a early on disclosure. I am a big hater of any kind of let's say, explanation of art, like that is based on medium. Therefore, I'm a hater of digital art. Although I have a master's in digital art, I don't really understand how can someone still be discussing about digital art. That reminds me, I'm going back to ages when we were talking about video, when we were talking about web art with such poor examples of art. And this is the same goes for digital art. Basically, poor art has been created by tons daily. I happen to be a professor in the School of Fine Arts. In an expanded media, my city is an expanded media. Therefore, I get a daily exposure to hundreds digital so-called art by either artists, students, and people that maybe are aspiring to be part of an exhibition that I'm curating, as I am also heading the Athens Biennale. Now, I want to say that I am, though, very much interested in living digital, in what we are doing by living digital, and what does this mean for our identity. Basically, digital is not a tool, so it's. I think we should start abandoning the use of digital as a tool, and get into understanding digital in a philosophical, or I would say existential way. Yesterday, I was browsing a couple of dozens of applications for AI exhibition that we had in Onas Foundation. Some colleagues of mine were co-curating this project, and I came across them with very mixed feelings. By using terminology in order to support and pitch a project, I think that does a misservice to arts. Being geeky is not enough anymore, and instead, unless you are applying for a sponsorship by a company or maybe by an authority. But regardless of that, within the artistic circles, I think we have retracted from being philosophical to being geeky. And this is a problem that we find in every, I would say, application of art. Now, being in my talk, I'm talking about the shift from audience to users and from artists to service providers. Now, 15 years ago, me and a team of colleagues, we started the Athens Biennale. And at that point, the exhibition was still what a Biennale is. Everyone was talking about a large-scale exhibition, and that's what we, naive as we were, thought of creating a biennial that was basically a large-scale exhibition. Sooner, though, we understood that basically we are speaking on our own as curators, because the audience was looking after something totally different. Therefore, in the sequence of the next iterations of the Athens Biennale, we moved from the experience to what we felt that was more needed at time, where I'm talking about from then 2007 to 2009, to creating what we understood as an experience. Since then, of course, experience has been so trivial, part of the experience culture and experiential market. Nevertheless, we understood that if the audience is not inside the exhibition in a way that makes them feel part of that and not just standing out of that and watching what we are there to propose to them, that made it totally unappealing to the audience. So we moved to build the next biennial as an experience, as I said, but that was not enough on its own end. And what seemed more important is to move from experience to engagement. Therefore, the third Athens Biennale was created as a big engagement experiment, having the audience interact in many different ways. But that was not even enough. At that point, when Athens was burning, people were out in the streets, also the audience changed. And that's not just a social pattern that we are trying to decipher here. There is something more to that. It's the use of the digital media, and especially the social platforms, that they have ultimately totally shifted the identity of the audience from someone that is passively consuming to someone that wants to be participating. Therefore, Omonia, the 2013 edition of the Biennale, had to be redesigned in a way to accommodate this need for participation. And from then on, we moved to co-creation, because even that participation was not enough. It didn't have a target, and co-creation was in need, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into every single edition. What I want to stretch here is that we are not talking about digital art like it's usually presented, like massive digital screensavers. No, it's not like that. I hate that. I'm sorry to hear and see still artists that are engaged in that kind of art. We're talking about something totally different. For example, we're talking about new identities, multiple identities, the possibility to have multiple identities as creators and as audience makes us come to new conclusions. Recently, due to COVID, I think all these things came to their first peak, to the first global peak. We understood by creating platforms like the YouTube channels, etc., that we have moved our cultural organizations working into them on a daily basis. We understand that the separation between audience and the artist is not valid anymore. We are talking about an audience that has become users. And the user is not someone that is passively consuming what we give them. The user is making their own navigation and their own use of the tools that we are providing. So basically, the user has all the power over our work. And this is a power that we kept to ourselves for centuries. The whole history of art has been based on the singularity of the artist that is so significant and so differentiated that basically is standing on her own soapbox, sharing his or her views. We're not talking about our views anymore. Our views are becoming more and more obsolete. Who cares about our views? At best, we are becoming moderators. And moderators are the people who can accommodate collective intellect, who can maybe create platforms like the Genius platform Ilan has provided to us minutes ago, that make us see the world in different lenses. And this is basically the most that we can do. Now, I'm of course very troubled to see how, what is the new identity of the artist? The new identity of the artist is that of a service provider. And this is something that, as working in the cultural sector, we understand it on our daily interaction with artists. Artists that participate in an exhibition let go of their formal artworks, let go of their former identities, and basically they want to be perceived by cultural institutions as service provider. Therefore, they charge by their participation. And this is a new union, global union that we are mostly engaged with of unionized artists that we consider ourselves service providers. So basically, we are giving our time and capacities in an exhibition, in a museum or whatever, in a biennial or whatever. We are creating something of a service. And then that, as a professor, takes me to my last argument, which is I'm still working on that, because basically my laboratory in the School of Fine Arts is about trying to redefine what the role of the artist in the future should be. And what I see in awe and amazement is that basically we are talking about that kind of service provider, that the person who is able to provide for others to live a better experience. So we are becoming something as sophisticated waiters, some from hotels to service providers. And this is a new, I would say, global shift in the perception of our occupation. And then, if this is our occupation, how should we train our new and young artists? We should move from formal training, and I bring this forth as an argument and also as a food for thought, because currently we are working on our core curriculum. I bet Dimitris is also working on his curriculum at their school. We should be in a very brave way, move out from the formal training into emotional training. How can we best serve others, and how can we feel okay about serving others? Is it something that we can do? Is it something that we are trained to do in the School of Fine Arts? No, we are not. We are trained to believe that we are the unicorns, and this is something that we have to bravely abandon in order to move into a new era. Thank you.
Thank you, Poka. We have to stop here as our time is limited. Thank you all for your very interesting presentations and arguments, of course. So we don't have much time for questions, but I would like to make one question to all of you and actually give you 30 seconds each to reply, please. So we saw various perspectives with regards to digital art and technology through your work and ideas. So I would like to ask you, how do you see that digital technologies affect the way you make your projects, and how these help us, the users or the audience, redefine our relationship with technology per se? Thank you. Can we start with Kaan?
I'm sorry, Katerina, could you please repeat the question?
Of course, of course. So how do you see that digital technologies affect the way you make your art projects, and how these help us, the audience, to redefine our relationship with technology?
Yeah, I mean, going back to Marshall McLuhan again, you know, it's the classic medium is the message, and any kind of media you use affects the way you express yourself. And in terms of, you know, new media, the software we use, the display methods we use, they all come with their own set of, you know, rules and limitations, like Robert said. So when I'm presenting something in a VR setting, there's a certain language I'm limited by in order to make an efficient use of that media. But when it is, let's say, presented in a physical space, then I need to consider the dimensions of that space and how the spatial experience is going to work. So like music, like filmmaking, I think digital media and the softwares and tools are definitely coming with their own flavor. For instance, even, you know, in 3D media, for instance, the artist, like 3D artists, can understand which renderer has been used, because even, you know, it looks like a standard 3D animation tool. Every different computation has its own look and flavor and warmth, you know. So it's like using different types of paints in a way for a different feeling or a different kind of painting.
Thank you. So, Ilan, do you think that through your art projects, can we redefine our relationship with technology in a way?
Yeah, I don't think digital or analog should be treated as something specific. I think it's a matter of perspective. I'm following Terence McKenna's view on this. So digital is how close you are to media, how far or how affected you are from a media, from a medium. What is special in our project is not the digitality, which again, I think it's a magic glue, all-encompassing term, as we hear in electronic music. What is electronic music? I don't understand what it means. Yoros Mazonakis is electronic music. It's electronically produced, mastered, mixed, distributed, etc., and consumed. So I'm thinking that what is special in the project is that we're trying to automate and to close a circle in the automation of comics, because comics were always an automatic and industrial form of expression. And I think that if we manage to bridge the gap of production and consumption, so ideally make comics for machines that are reading comics and responding with comics to each other without any mediation from human actants, I think I have a lot of things to learn about this thing as a comics artist.
Super thing. Dimitris and Poka, would you like to share any comments?
Yeah. Well, it's difficult to answer this very quickly, but a couple of things I'll mention which probably relates. I very much identify with what Robert Henke mentioned a while ago. I mean, yeah, I mean, for me, making art doesn't have to be with digital or analog media. You know, you start to create something and you use whatever you want to use or you need to use or you feel like using. Yeah. So, and obviously we're not talking about tools, we're talking about media. And I very much also identify with the limitation term. And I think that because we have this abundance of new forms of expression through different technologies that can give us this potential, this affordance, and that limiting ourselves is very important, because if you don't go deep into the process of using your medium in order to start to structure what you're trying to talk about and what you're trying to say and what you're trying to formulate, then you have no chance of either becoming personal or expressive or whatever. So yeah, it is a big problem that we have so many media in our hands. So trying to create these limitations and these filters is one of the methodologies that we also try to teach in our school, in our department. So and also what's very important is what I try to teach my students in both departments that I work in is the critical use of technology. Yeah, I mean, I hate the terms innovation and how we glorify them or whatever. Yeah, this should be away from me. I never use them. You know, particularly when we talk about art making, obviously innovativeness is of no importance. Yeah, so we try to approach this media in a critical manner and try to make use in relation to our expressive practices what we need to make use of, yeah, to say something and to formulate the forms that we need to formulate.
So, yeah, thank you. Poka,
yeah, I'd like to talk more, but I think I shouldn't.
Yeah. Poka, would you like to close the session with a 30-second comment, please?
Yeah, I want to respond also to Eva Goria's question about the philosophical versus the geeky. What I said is that we should be bravely moving more into the philosophical and abandon the geekiness of the medium discussion, as everyone said before me. For example, multiple identities. So far, philosophy has been treating identity as something that is expandable, of course, but also contained. The digital era now leads us to to live into multiple identities. I can be a professor by day, I can be a gender fluid Lolita cruising on the internet by night. And these are the same person. How can I manage, for example, to live these dualities or even more personalities at the same time? This is something that neither philosophy has able to grasp, and of course, by sure, not art so far. So what are we going to be professing? What are we going to be teaching our students? How are we going to be equipping them for living that kind of life? That they are the directors, not of a singular identity, but of many identities.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any more time, guys, so thank you very much for this interesting session. The conference actually continues, and I'm going to hand over to Hannah, so you can take it over from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, and Katerina for facilitating that so beautifully. So we're going to move on now. We don't have time to take a break, so you're going to have to grab a coffee whilst listening. I'm going to pass you over in a minute to our next keynote. They're a duo, Teyosh, made from Serbian Sofia Stankovic and Teodora Stojkovic. Originally, as I said, from Serbia, but now living in Amsterdam. They are a pair of design thinkers, designing and analysing contemporary social phenomena and exploring relationships between humans and technology, working with lots of immersive technology, VR, within fashion, and making projects for clients like MTV and Nike. So, Teyosh, are you there? The floor is yours.
Yeah, we are. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Sofia.
And I'm Teodora.
And we were very much looking forward to coming to Athens back in April. But of course, as COVID hit, we are now here, luckily still in this form, thanks to technology. So we are going to start our presentation.
You have to share screen.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's not. Are you sharing now?
Do you see our screen?
Yep, we see you very clearly.
Okay, great. So together we form Teyosh, and we are digital designers and art directors, but also we are part of millennials generations, which means that we are rarely caught without a piece of technology in our hands. This is what this photo is all about. So we often work for clients in the fashion and entertainment industry. However, we wouldn't be able to actually get noticed by brands if it wasn't for our innovative approach that is almost always related to digital technology and social networks. And we are presenting this through self-initiated projects that we are going to talk about today mostly. So through these kind of projects, we actually help brands to use new mediums and respond creatively to the changes of digital era.
So we can easily spot the technological advancements and how technology evolved and laugh at the old tech. But what is harder to spot are the changes within ourselves and the changes in society. And this is one example from China, which is actually quite easy to spot, where they built 2 separate lanes for people who are on their mobile phones and for people who aren't. And especially now in the times of COVID.
Yeah, actually 2020 came and all of a sudden technology is such a big deal. I love specifically this photo because it shows how we've gone far with social networks. So if someone showed this photo 20 years ago, the context of this photo would be so hard and also very comical to guess. First question would be, what is she doing with the ice cream? And then why is she wearing the mask? But this looks almost normal in 2020. So what happened this year is that we witnessed a true digital transformation. In times of COVID, technology enabled us to continue living lives almost like we used to. So the work continued, also yoga classes were organized online, also meetings.
A conference like this one.
Yeah, and more than ever, we are following real time also the newest measures and restrictions and statistics about COVID via our gadgets.
Just a moment. Okay, so maybe the sound is not working, but yeah, that's fine. So this is the work we did a couple of years ago for MTV. And we were invited because, again, it was on a topic of technology. And what we like to focus in our work is basically how our personal relationship has been built to technology, and how on an individual level it is changing our habits. So what we wanted to depict is actually how close it came to our hearts, our minds, and our bodies. So many things that we take as a norm today, and we take it for granted today, would be completely mind-blowing only 15 years ago. For example, we follow the information and we get the information real time. We can shop and socialize behind the screen. We rely on Google to know everything that pops in our mind. And we talk to people who are in a completely remote parts of the world. And in our work, we like to draw attention to these gradual changes and to actually analyze what we as a society are adapting to and what we are now taking as the new normal.
So let's talk about how technology redefined and challenged communication between us, and then also our ability to focus, and how it even attempts to challenge our reality. So communication, the first time we got intrigued in how technology is changing communication between people is when we moved from Belgrade to Amsterdam. And we actually continued our communication with friends through social networks, how it usually happens. But soon we discovered that we were having the whole conversation about where people were or what they were doing, or also how they expressed themselves and how they communicate with each other, only based on what they shared online. So we were actually less motivated to meet new people and socialize with our immediate environment, as we were socializing with already familiar friends from back home. And this also goes the other way around. So today you can feel closer to someone living on another part of the planet who you have never met in person than with your neighbor who you grew up with. So with digital technology, what happens is that actually cultural identity goes beyond national, linguistic and also geographical borders.
Just a moment, yeah, I think we're having a problem with video slides. Did anyone else had this problem earlier, or? Okay, great. Yeah, at the time I was reading a psychology book called Games People Play by Eric Berne. And because we were spending so much time online, it led me to think and led us to discuss what are the psychological games that people play in online environment, where you cannot see the body language of the person you're talking to, and where the communication is already limited by this predefined interface design. So the communication is in that sense fragmented. We only see bits and pieces of it through likes and comments, and through also content that is curated, because we, of course, try to present the best version of ourselves online. And as the interface design changes, so does the communication. For example, we got used to expressing our specific feelings through memes or filters. And sometimes these emotions are so specific that we wouldn't be able, and this humor is so specific that we wouldn't be able to actually put it in any other way. We wouldn't be able to put it in words. And because of Twitter, we learned to write and summarize our thoughts in 140 characters. Then we also, when we take a photo, we think of a caption for it. And in that way, as society is changing, also the technology and social media is changing. But as social media is changing, it is also adapting to the needs of the society. So in that sense, whichever is the egg and whichever is the chicken in this situation is really hard to tell, as they are both fueling and feeding from each other.
And then we started the project Dictionary of Online Behavior. It is the dictionary of new words that we invented for the phenomena that emerged from social networks. So each word is presented through explanation and examples. And this part is very similar to the dictionaries that we are all used. This part is very similar to traditional dictionaries. But what is different is that each term is also presented through a short GIF-like animated video as a popular internet form. So let's show some examples of the words. Trillification, it's a thrill about getting notifications. So as you probably know, we get a hit of dopamine, which is released in happy and exciting situations every time we see the notifications. And this is actually the core and the base of our addiction and the principle on which the socials is built and also monetized. So this monetization comes largely from ads. And basically advertisers are paying for our attention to their ads. And we do end up scrolling our timelines because of this dopamine release. Very interesting is that I recently heard a quote that the only two industries that refer to their customers as users are the illegal drug industry and software industry. And then other term is half-seen. It's a phenomena when somebody sends you a message, but you don't want to open because you're not in the mood to reply immediately. So if you open, the other person will get this little scene that you have at the bottom of your message. And then you might be perceived as rude or maybe as lazy for not replying straight away. This one is particularly interesting because it is actually the UX, UI designers that designed this little scene. And it later on created this whole anxiety in society that we have to be available all the time and that we have to reply to our messages instantly. So it basically changed the whole culture of texting, and ultimately it's the only it's a very small change in the interface design. And then forcing, it's a selfie that you don't voluntarily take part in, but you are forced by someone's enthusiasm. I find this one to be interesting because it actually changed the way we spend time offline. So we spend our offline time together making selfies and forces in order to post them online. And around the time we wrote and defined forcey, selfie was announced as the word of the year by Oxford dictionaries. So we knew that it is a hot topic and that we are on the right track, let's say.
And then follower ratio, it's the ratio of followers to followings.
Do you want to be followed or do you want to be a follower? Bear with me and I will teach you how to reach that perfect follower ratio. You have to show interest in others. So just like, comment, and follow, follow, follow. Once you get people to follow you back, reverse it. Just unfollow, unfollow, unfollow. It's that easy. Believe me, you'll go from an average person to an influencer in a month.
So what we showed in this satirical explainer is a strategy that emerged on social media, and it's usually used by influencers and brands. And we find it so interesting because it is so generic on one hand. You follow as many people as possible, but then you rely on basic human traits such as showing back the interest. So people follow you back and then you unfollow them in order to have more followers than followings. So this is important in terms of social capital, and social capital is the number of followings, and it is actually
likes
and likes.
Yeah,
and actually it's important in real world for some profession. It's really important because for example, for actors or models or people working in entertainment industry, it is not unusual to get asked how many followers you have if you want to cast for a specific role or to promote a brand, because production companies and brands are relying on these individuals' followings and audience. And then timeline climate is the idiom, and it stands for prevailing feeling or opinion on a timeline at a certain moment. And we had this with COVID so obvious. So at some point, everybody was talking about the situation in China. Then it transferred to the situation in Italy. Then there was this prevailing, our whole timelines were filled with jokes about how to spend your quarantine, how to survive your quarantine. And then again, it transferred to global protests such as Black Lives Matters or Greece, what was happening in Greece or Minsk or Serbia. So what we often tend to forget about this, about our timeline, is that we see a very leveled opinion or very leveled specific emotion towards an event. But actually we tend to gather people around us who share similar opinions like us. But also also the algorithms are actually tailoring our content towards our interest. So we sometimes think that what we see on our timeline is a public opinion, but it's actually our own bubble.
And then feed noise, it's a noun, and it's a real-time clutter of information on other people's lives on the feed, but also information on happenings in the world. So as you know, we live in information era. And sometimes this speed at which we get the information and the variety of it can become so overwhelming. So, for example, our parents had the problem to get to information, while for us, the being flooded by information become the new way of censorship, let's say. And the very interesting fact is that in the first 2 years of the internet, there was a bigger circulation of information than in the whole history of civilization.
Yeah. So to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning, we were like trying to figure out how to construct our observations. So we wanted to write new rules that are imposed on social media. And then we wrote down a couple of modern proverbs. For example, where did you take this photo is the new, where did you buy this piece? So we try so hard to curate our timelines with nice photos from all over the world. And at some point, Instagram actually became to stimulate tourism in this sense, and to actually promote some very photogenic places. So what social media has done is to make everyone accessible for comparison. In the past, people would compare themselves with people from their environment. but now they're actually competing with the whole world.
And then we were trying to figure out in which form should this project be, because we had many scattered thoughts and proverbs, like the one that Theodora said, but then it all boiled down and came to these expressions that we defined. And at the time, we decided to make a website, and then we were searching for a good metaphor, a good element to present this story on the website. And because this project is not about digitization, so we didn't want to take a regular dictionary book and just translate it to the online medium. We actually wanted to, in a way, reinvent the form, because this is about digitalization and the impact of digitalization. So we thought that a tab would be a perfect element to tell this story. Because tabs are what people used earlier to archive, organize, and write the old dictionaries. And tabs are also what is constructing our browser window for the internet today.
So this is how the website looks. There are now around 25 words. So if you're curious to read more, we invite you to visit the website. Also, what we did is that at some point we included other people to work with us on this project. So other artists, designers, but also writers. And it was very important for us because it's not only our personal perspective, but rather the perspective of the whole generation that is one of the last generations that are actually not digital natives. So we always love to see people participating in this project. It's always so interesting to see how these new words live and how people use hashtags. For example, I often make forces with my cat. And then later on, we discovered that many other people do forces with their cats, but also with their grandmas.
So yeah, these are all of the words. And then focus, how technology impacted our focus. So we noticed that technology has changed the way we focus, and that actually we have a very hard time staying in offline environment, and that we often drift to online environment that is much more stimulating, much more fast. And we have a hard time not being stimulated all the time. So we're used to sensationalism and stimuli, and we are highly intolerant to boredom. We also often jump from a tab to a tab. And on the other hand, we would never give up the technology as designers and as millennials. We would never give up the modern technology. And some people do. Some people who realize this problem, they go back to the old phones. But for us, this meant that we should probably be starting a new project. And with this in mind, we Googled our assumptions.
Humans have shorter attention span than goldfish. So we saw this, and then we Googled our assumptions, and then we realized that how people actually can measure the attention span of the goldfish. So we realized that there are a lot of this kind of titles. And what was ironical is that actually the articles about shortened attention spans were designed so that it grabs your attention.
So here's a short background of distractions. This is Skinner's box. And Skinner was a psychologist who introduced the concept of variable reward. So pigeons would peck, and when they peck, they would get food. And first group of pigeons would get food each time they peck, and it was a certain amount of food. But the second group of pigeons would get food only after a random amount of pecking, and also it would be a random amount of food. So what happened is that the first group of pigeons who knew that they would get food, they would only pack when they were hungry. And the second group of pigeons were practically hooked up. So they were packing all the time because they were in this expecting mode. And if this sounds familiar to you, this is because slot machines work like that. But also social media works in the same way. So we check our phones on average, I read somewhere 150 times a day. And sometimes we do get notifications, and sometimes these notifications are very pleasant. They are, for example, likes and nice comments, but sometimes there are also invitations to places where we don't want to go to. So it's a variable reward. And with this story in mind, we initiated the project Attention Span.
And one of the inspirations for the project was the modern proverb, sitting is the new smoking, which you might have heard of already. So we decided to put it literally in a form of a cigarette warning labels, because we are so distracted and immersed online. We so often forget about our physical bodies, which leads to hours of sitting, and actually the same cardiovascular diseases as smoking. And there are many apps such as Calm and Bodify, for example, that try to make phones our companions in trying to reconnect with ourselves. But we wanted actually to propose the solution which is outside of online world, the ones that will stand in our immediate space. So we decided to launch a collection of physical objects, and we created actually a fashion for our closest ourselves. This is some of the pieces that we created, and also for our phones.
So yeah, the collection was made possible by a brand from New York with whom we teamed up, and then we also wanted to make a campaign on social media, of course, and these are some of the photos from campaign. And then we thought, because filters became a thing and they were globally recognized as a phenomenon, as part of the campaign, we also made these filters, face filters. So by blinking, you get either yes or no. So you decide whether you are a social media addict or not. And then as part of the same promotion, we also made these questionnaires. And I love polls on social media because they give you access to so many people at the same time, and you get to hear the opinion of people. So we wanted to investigate how people relate to their phones and to their gadgets. And we posed many questions. So some of them are, I often pull out my phone as an impulse. And scrolling through feed rarely gives me a positive kick, yet I do it daily. And as you can see, most of the answers were yes, around 80%. I use the phone on the toilet. This was a tricky one. And then that feeling of being judged, that feeling for spending time. Yeah, I cannot read it because of the screen on top.
Yeah.
For spending time on the phone, but kind of not caring because the thing that I'm looking at is so much fun. So that one is about staying in the online environment mentally while you're, of course, physically offline. The last thing I see before sleep is my phone, and I check my notifications first thing in the morning. Again, many positive answers, meaning that we go to bed with our phone and we wake up with our phone. So surely it does have impact also on our dreams. And that brings us to the part of reality. So, so far we've spoken how interface design and how technology has influenced our communication and also our habits. But it literally attempts to also change our and challenge our reality. And that is through VR, AR, and MR.
And the first VR we did was for kids, and it was for one of the biggest festivals in Europe that actually introduced cutting edge technology and new technology to kids. So as you probably know, the experience stimuli in VR can be very joyful, but they can be also very scary. And because of that, we didn't want to traumatize children, of course. But we didn't grow up with VR, so we couldn't possibly know what is scary in VR for the kid age 5. So with this project, we tested on ourselves a lot and on a couple of brave kids. Since this work was made for digital natives, we decided to make a joyful ride that will naturally implement the language of social media and put them in unexpected places. So we took references from Candy Crush, Google Maps, and emojis. What we soon realized with working on this project is that kids have the ability to build fantastical elements if you sparkle their imagination. They're already so easily altering the reality. So it was interesting to see how they built on top of the experience and talk about the things that were not even happening in VR. And it made us wonder about the influence VR can have on kids. Because sometimes children remember things from childhood that didn't happen or that are exaggerated. So for us, the big question was, will they remember something they experienced in VR as real?
Yeah, and that got us also to question, because this is the first time that a designer is actually able to create the whole environment. How big is the impact that it can have? As you might know already, VR has been used in many medical studies to cure phobias and PTSD. For example, so in that sense, the influence can be quite big. And the question is, are we as designers equipped to carry such responsibility? And can we somehow, by accident, make a wrong or hurtful experience for someone? And then the second VR we did was interesting for completely different reasons. It's a VR we did for Burberry brand. And I think one of the main motivations for production company to approach us to make this was actually because of how easy it is to mask London. So the brief was to make London in kind of Burberry clothing, let's say in Burberry branding. So it was, of course, way easier production-wise to do it all in animation and in VR than to actually go and have shooting days in London. Yeah, these are some scenes from the experience. And yeah, of course, what we see happening today with COVID is also the same. I mean, because now people are not able to travel as much as we all could. We get to meet in these virtual spaces, and also some digital shoots are happening with models such as Lil Michaela or similar digital models, and also, for example, digital fashion shows are happening, events are organized in virtual space. So in that sense, I think VR is at this moment, because of COVID, gaining a momentum.
I just never taken the time to appreciate London and walk around even just in the gardens and like lying down in the meadows or playing by the lake or actually finding the nature within London.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be nice during the lockdown to go somewhere and to escape even to virtual reality? The last work I'm going to speak about briefly is the work we did for a festival here in the Netherlands. So as said, we were very impressed by how big filters became, because they are basically putting on and projecting a digital layer onto our bodies, and it was globally recognized. So in this work, what we want to do is to basically give filters a bit more meaning than the aesthetical purpose than they have. We made 3 chapters about 3 prominent topics in 2019, and we presented them through filters. So social media users are protagonists of the story, and the filter is actually the story. So the first chapter is about consumerism. As you might know, since the birth of social media, the sales of clothing has increased by 60%. There is this pressure in society to show always, and especially pressure on influencers and public persona, to always show themselves in new clothing on social media. But also it is due to, of course, the ads being more available online, and shopping being more facilitated due to social media online. So these are some of the images of the filter. And then the next chapter is the narcissist. So yeah, in social media is definitely tapping on this egocentric need to express and impress. And face filters are providing even more excuse to take another selfie and post it, and obsessed with self-image. And like Narcissus, who once fell into the lake looking at his reflection, the social media users fall in love with each new selfie taken.
And the last chapter is How Dare You? So what we recently saw with Black Lives Matter movement and other global protests is that social media can be used to drive movements and fuel debates. So now being an influencer almost became a synonym to being an activist. Here specifically with this filter, we focused on teenage activist Greta Thunberg, who is a phenomenon emerged actually from social media and who gave a fierce speech towards the end of 2019 that set the internet on fire.
Yeah, so the last chapter is about activism. And these were the 3 prominent topics that we thought were very important on social media in 2019 and still continue to be in 2020, I guess. So to summarize, we talked about how we use technology on a daily basis and how it has changed us on both personal and more global level. But most importantly, it inspired us to create the work we did, and it enabled us to share it now also with you. Wherever you're sitting, I heard there were many countries participating in this conference. Yeah, that is, I guess, the most important part about technology that should be said for the end. And I think we can now thank you for your attention, and I'm not sure if whether we have
time for the questions.
For Q&A.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys, so much. It's so interesting. I wonder how many people on this conference stood up from their chairs when they saw your cushions sitting as the new smoking. I jumped out of my seat immediately. I'm looking at those face filters. I'm wondering how do people get hold of those filters? Are they all readily available still, or are they project specific if people want to have a look at them and try them out themselves?
So yeah, the filters are available through our through our profile on Instagram. Yeah, for people, I guess some people know where to find them. It's in the tab. Yeah, it's a bit hard to explain. I don't know.
Look on that.
Like it's in a tab next to the grid, so they can be tried out there. And yeah.
And if there are any questions from the delegates who are listening, who are on the Zoom room with us, I'm just going to give them 60 seconds to type a question in capital letters, please, so we can see it really clearly. If there aren't any, then we'll move on, but it would be great if there is a question or two that we might throw at you. I wish that London looked quite as beautiful as it did in that Burberry VR.
Thanks.
Let's see if there are any questions coming.
Yeah, there are no traffic jams in London, right?
No. That would be nice, wouldn't it? No traffic, green spaces, flowers on the street, balloons in the telephone boxes.
Yeah, I think we can stop sharing screen as well.
I don't think there are any questions coming. Okay, so are you going to stay with us, the two of you?
Yeah.
Great. So if there are any questions that come up later, then you can reply to them, or they can come to you privately if you're still with us in this Zoom room. But thank you so much to think about, and some amazing imagery, and to just what's the word? Absorb. Thank you. Yeah. We will hopefully be able to speak to you later on the chat, via the chat. So thanks, guys, so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
All right.
Bye.
So we're going to move on now to our next panel discussion, and that's panel discussion is entitled Hyperconnectivity and Future Digital Societies, How Design and Technology Impact the Way that we relate to each other. And Atilim Sahin is facilitating this. Atilim, are you there?
Yes. Thank you so much, Anna. Hello, beautiful people. It's a pleasure to be here with all these brilliant minds. My name is Atilim. I'm connecting from Istanbul. I'm the Creative Hub Director at Atelier, one of the partners for this project, and the Secretary General at European Creative Hubs Network. I don't have that much time to talk about myself today because we have much more important topics to discuss. Here's what we are going to do. I have 5 billion speakers for you today to challenge your mind and to create new sparks in your brain. How? Today, we are going to talk about how design and technology impact the way we relate to each other. And we're going to mention the future of our digital societies. We will also talk about the new forms of the social norms, where we include the machines as a new medium to define our interactions with each other. This may be a series of presentations, and we will have a Q&A session at the very end after listening 5 talks. So if you have any questions during the presentations, please put them in the chat box, but note that your questions will be answered after we hear 5 presentations. As we did throughout the day, please type your questions in capital letters and mention the speaker name that you would like to address your questions to. So now, please sit back, fasten your seatbelts, take a breath, make sure that you have enough popcorn with you, and enjoy listening to these inspiring conversations. Here comes our first dear speaker. I would like to welcome Daphne Dragona to the stage. Daphne is a creator and writer based in Berlin. She worked as a creator for the Transmediale Festival from 2015 to 19. Today, she is going to talk about her project called Engineering Care. It's a super interesting project where she engaged artists, designers, technologists, and activists that produce works around how we will live and work with machines, and and speculating how relationships, dependencies might change. Let's listen more from her. Daphne, are you with us?
Yeah, hello. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi there. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Atilim. And a big thanks also to Vasilis and Akis for inviting me, and to the organizers as well. I will start right away. Just let me share my screen.
Daphne, are you able to see the chat box while you're presenting?
The chat box? No, I can't see the chat box right now.
Okay, anyways. I need to be quite sharp with the timings, as we already started the session 15 minutes late, so okay, I will kindly interrupt you.
Yeah, please do, but I will also set an alarm. So
right,
I'll keep track of time, don't worry.
Sure.
Okay, so what I will be talking about is the topic of care technologies. And as Atilim said, it's a topic that I engaged with in the last, let's say, 1 to 2 years with different projects of mine. So in a way, we could say that the engineering of care is already here. Social robots, online bots, virtual assistants are becoming more and more common at work, at home, in let's say different situations and environments. And artificial companions like Pepper, Siri, or Alexa have arrived, promising that they will inform us and entertain us, that they will provide guidance and keep us company. Now, the interesting thing about these systems is that they are equipped with face or voice recognition, in some cases with both. And they are machines that basically can, let's say, see us or hear us, and they can respond to our requests by continuously learning from our interests and habits. So we could say that they are here to organize and optimize everyday life. And they change, therefore, not only how we relate to technology, but also how we relate to each other. Now, there are three questions that I would like to raise as let's say, starting points, which are the following. So what feelings do technologies of care evoke, and which behaviors do they encourage? What role do they play or promise to play in different contexts? And why did they become common? Why did they become popular recently, or let's say now? So in order to address these questions, I will very briefly present different projects that address this topic. I will start with Software Garden, a project by Rory Pilgrim, which is a performance. Here's a picture from Transmediale 2019. Part of what the audience is experiencing at the Software Garden is written by poet and disability advocate Carol Calland. Carol is the person that we see at the projection at the far back. So Carol, as part of the, let's say, the performance, expresses her wish for a world where humans and machines and robots would live harmoniously with each other. And Pepper that we see here is a classic example of a social robot that is equipped with cameras, with sensors, with mics, with LEDs, and this facilitates its interaction with humans. Now, a robot like Pepper, as we hear at the performance, would comfort Carol because it would make her feel safe. It would make her, let's say, it would comfort her and help her respond to the harsh reality that she's facing in UK after the disability cuts. Now, on the hard side of things, the truth is that social robots are hardly developed, let's say, to the point that they can offer the services that they promise. And what is not being discussed so much is how they will capture, process, and classify human behavior in order to offer these services. This project is the work Alexiety by Median Group Beatnik and Lojak. And it's a work that the artist developed in order to capture and discuss the feelings that users develop towards personal intelligent assistants. The work is very much built around an album of 3 songs that they wrote, and that they used in a way to interact with systems like Alexa or Siri. So one of these lyrics that I have singled out here says, "Alexa, you creep me," while another one, for instance, says, "Alexa, you're getting better and better at anticipating the voices, the moods around you." So Alexa maybe is the most familiar example of what we could call a care technology nowadays, and has voice features. So like most intelligent assistants, it can detect the physical characteristics of a voice and also the emotional tone of a human voice. So systems like Alexa can locate the ethnic origin, the language accent, the gender, the age, and the mood of the user. So all in all, we are kind of seeing that they expose users to a new form of continuous surveillance, and this happens in a way, in the softest possible way. Moving on, this is a project called Macho Sounds, Gender Noise. It's a project that was created by artist Sophia Donna and myself recently. We presented it at the Staatsgalerie in Stuttgart last July as part of the Irritierte Stadt Festival. And what we try to do in this project is to discuss the role of sound in the reproduction of gender stereotypes, specifically looking into the car industry. The reason that I bring it in here is that we also wanted to comment on the gender of the machinic voice. So as part of the project, we have an animated text running, and this is one of its phrases, its lines that I will quickly read for you. The voice that helps you navigate, calls home, plays music and podcasts, adjusts the temperature, shows gas stations, and proposes restaurants is female. So here we are discussing the role of systems like Alexa when they enter, let's say, the car environment. And we are kind of arguing that the voice is female because it creates a feeling of familiarity, because it builds associations to roles that are traditionally undertaken by women. It builds associations to women because they're considered to be more attentive to someone's needs, because they are the ones that, let's say, have been engaging with affective or invisibilized labor. Now, the thing is that when this happens, when machines seen as female undertake all the small things, like the ones that are mentioned here in the text, then there is the fear that women as well might be seen in reverse as technology. And this is what Shara Sharma is kind of pointing out in her beautiful work. She's a feminist scholar. And the last project that I would like to bring in is a project by Caroline Sinders called CareBot. Caroline developed this project last year as part of the project, the Web Residencies program called Engineering Care. The general framework is it's a program produced by ZKM and the Académie Slow Solitude. And as part of this project, what Caroline did was that she basically wanted to develop a bot, to program a bot that would somehow discuss the problem of online harassment in the social media. What is interesting here, and that's why I also bring it in specifically, is that at some point we even read a line saying, "I'm a bot, not a therapist." So Caroline highlights that this is a bot that can provide information. This is a bot that underlines the problem, but it cannot become a therapist. It cannot provide psychological support. A bot like the machines that we're discussing do not have cognitive or sentient capacities to do that. So it kind of sets the limit of where we are. And now, in a way, to conclude, I would like to say that the technologies such as the ones that I mentioned and discussed are, in my opinion, the effective infrastructures of our times. And they are effective, I would argue, not only because, let's say, they capture and they process feelings, they are also effective for the promises that they come to fulfill. So the social robots, the intelligent personal assistants, the bots, and different types of software that come in today for this reason have all appeared at the time of a generalized crisis, have all appeared at the time of a crisis which is linked to a crisis of work, linked to a crisis of care. This is something that scholars like Nancy Fraser and Helen Hester are discussing. And this is something important to take in mind, because the technologies, the care technologies, come in to fill in gaps. They come in to restore bonds that have been broken. And of course, the question is to which extent this can happen, as these are systems that are being introduced by the market. In some cases, they are supported by governments. And what we see is a form of care that, to a great extent, is having to do with an instrumentalization of care itself. Now, there are gaps, but there are also cracks, and this is probably what I would like to end with. And the cracks found in these systems is what the artists, let's say, locate and point at with their work, inviting us to kind of, let's say, see through the cracks and get new perceptions, get new perspectives about how these technologies work, but also how maybe they can change. Because the future of care technologies, to a great extent, depends on the attention we pay and we will pay to them, and on the critical reflection that is needed about their operation, about their promises, about their processes, about how they are enforcing forms of classification, regulation, and control. So all in all, and to return to my first question, it is not really so much about how Alexa or Pepper make us feel, but it is rather about the world which is being built around such systems, and about the way that this will affect everyday life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daphne. It was super interesting work. Thanks for sharing us. I was particularly interested in the cracks part that you lastly mentioned. Super interesting to hear. So I would like to invite you to put your questions or comments down in the chat box if you have any. We will have them answered at the end by Daphne. So let's move on to our second speaker. I would like to invite Joan Cekic from Belgrade. Today, he's going to talk about digital capitalism and the society of control. He will touch upon the pandemic situation where new normal becomes something which Gilles Deleuze calls as society of control. Together with Joan, explore if we could make the future of digital society to become real-time democracy. Joan, are you with us?
Yes, hello.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, I will speak about digital capitalism and society of control, which means this is the notion which Gilles Deleuze used 30 years ago, you know, and what is very important for us now that everybody thinks that we are actually living in a society of control. So what is, in my opinion, very, very, let's say, very important in this, that actually we are living in a very complex and atonal world. So we need some kind of the long-term thinking. Why we need that and how we actually think about this world. First of all, we are living in the world of crisis. We have unseen levels of inequality, environmental degradation, climate destabilization, and of course, populism, conflicts, economic uncertainty, and so on. So this is actually complex and atonal world. What is very important in this approach is that when we speak about digital capitalism, it means that every society has or corresponding in a particular kind of machine. So despotic societies is corresponding to the similar machines, very simple machines like levers or clocks, you know. Disciplinary society is corresponding to thermodynamics machine or, you know, Fordism and things like that. And society of control, which is now we are entering, is operate with a machine of third generation, which means computers. So if you are talking about control of populations, is actually a different kind or a different way how we organize space of enclosure. In a disciplinary society, it was let's say some kind of the molds or boxes, you know, and then you are passing from in one's, let's say, line, you are passing from one box to the other box, from family to the school, then from the army, then to the factory, maybe hospital, maybe possibly prison and things like that. So what you have there, that is a different model of enclosure. And you are always have to start from the beginning. You are always have to learn something in a new box. But in a society of control, seems to us that we have any boundaries, that we are open and free, but actually we have some kind of the limits, which is invisible enclosure. And if you want to pass it, if you want to go further, you need some code or you need password. Well, that's that will enable you to access to information or to reject it. Also, if you have some e-card, you can go from one place to the other place. In other way, we really live in that complex world, and if we want, to move further, we really need to rethink that concept of control. Why? Well, first of all, it is 30 years ago. Then the second things, Gilles Deleuze didn't know for new, let's say, development that we are coming in the epoch which is called Anthropocene. Also, we have climate change or destabilization, and we almost produce artificial intelligence. So if we are looking closer at those new situations, we will see that Anthropocene is something which science says, well, okay, Homo sapiens became a geological force, which means we need to control that force. Why? Because in one moment, if it is real, there is no difference anymore between nature and society. So human activity can produce implosion of civilization or irreversible damage to the system of the earth. What we need then? Well, we need some kind of non-anthropocentric approach, which means the human is not separate from any other, entity and natural environment, which means that the world is not a collection, of the isolated object, but it's a network of phenomena which is fundamentally interconnected and interdependent. So we need to think on a new way. We need to think, let's say, on the long-term thinking. If we are thinking about climate change, everybody focus on discussion who is to blame for it. Is it the nature normal process or human activity is blamed for it? But actually it doesn't matter at this moment if climate change is starting to accelerate. It means, first of all, we will have climate refugees. Then we will have climate nomads. And after that, we will have to create some civilization or the culture of multitude. Well, look, Corona, we have global impact and let's say local response. Every country is, reacting his own way. We have Sweden model, we have different other models, and less or more close, but with climate change and global impact, we must have global response. It means we cannot, separate in that moment. If you're looking from that point of view, this is a very new situation. And of course, we are nearly let's say, to have artificial intelligence. The guy who is working on that, one of the first, his name is Irving John Good, said that it is the last invention of the man. After that, the man had nothing to invent. Actually, for him, the survival of the man depends on early construction on that ultra-intelligent machine. Why? Because we are, as you know, in a complex world which is accelerate and change very, very fast. So where is the problem? The problem is that we don't know how to control that. He said that maybe the machine will be, let's say, polite enough to tell us how to control that. So it's a very funny situation. It's like, in a science fiction film. But we have a much more serious question. Can you imagine that we have any super intelligence entity to be privately owned by any country, by any corporation or persons. I think it's very naive. Why? Why some ultra-intelligent entity accept to be owned by anyone? But it means why it accepts to be a slave. When we analyze artificial intelligence, it is just the part of collective arrangement. Machine is actually just one part, and it means that we have to rethink the other component of collective arrangements. So, when you are looking at different films, you will see that always robots and androids we treat like a slave. So in this moment, we really have to think, is it possible to treat on that way some super intelligent entity? Well, on the end, we have to think how to create two things, I think. The first is mentioned, it is the civilization of multitude. But the second one is some kind of real-time democracy. All the time we heard here how artists react with environment in real time and things like that. But I think that now is the moment that we think of real-time democracy, which means that citizens there is on the first place. It means that not only the citizens is the object of controls, but also governments, corporations, and things like that, institutions. So if we think about creations or creative, we must have new type of creations of connections and interactions. And also we need new type of control, how we connect and interact with the world or Earth, with the others, and with non-human entity. Well, with real-time democracy and civilization of multitude, we maybe be capable to control our components of collective agreements, which means we will enter with a new connection with machine, and also we will, don't have any boundary between us and machine, which means we will be in the post-human era. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jovan. I would like to quickly move to the next speaker. I'm quite stressed about the time. So our next guest is a research and design studio based in Amsterdam, Netherlands. It's called Day2. Day2 studio was founded in 2015 by the architect duo Panos Sakas and Fotenis Setaki. I think today both of them are going to be with us. I see Foteni. The studio uses robotic 3D printing with recycled plastic to develop and implement circular design concepts of high aesthetic value and societal impact. Today, we are going to hear more about their work on co-creating public space with robotic 3D printing and recycled plastics. The Day2 studio, are you here? Foteni.
Hello, yes, we're here.
Hey.
Thank you for the invitation and the nice introduction. I'm gonna start sharing my screen 1 moment. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
So my name is Fotenis Setaki, and together with Panos Sakas, we're co-founders of the Day2, a design studio that is based in Rotterdam. What we do is to explore different circular design scenarios in combination with, let's say, design and digital craftsmanship principle. We started in 2015 from the observation that we are a growing society, consuming a lot of resources and generating enormous amounts of plastic waste, following a linear approach from consumption to discarding. So we wanted to show through our work what design can do in this approach and suggest a circular way of thinking. A circular way of thinking where we close the loop of plastic waste locally by using new technologies. By using new technologies, it's not only possible to add value to these discarded materials by making, let's say, elements that are, let's say, of high aesthetical value or could not be produced in different ways before. But also for us, from our point of view, it is, let's say, a challenge to be able to involve citizens both in the recycling process, but also in the making of the city. From a technical point of view, we started from material tests, trying to understand whether it is possible, let's say, to 3D print with recycled plastics. And soon we realized that actually this was relatively easy to achieve, but also gave us advantages by, for example, giving us this technology freedom of using many different materials coming from single-use packaging like PP, HDPE, PP, but also by developing our own production process, we were able to shorten the material processing approach. So we could directly 3D print from washed and shredded materials, skipping the paths of, let's say, pelletizing and filament that you see in traditional 3D printing. Here you can see a short video of how we work. So the first step for recycling plastic is, of course, sorting and make sure that we have a clean material stream that we then shred and feed the extruder. The extruder is working in 5 different temperatures, melting the plastics, and in that way we are able to reshape it in many different forms, giving a new life, like furniture pieces, decorative elements, but also building components. So let's say one part of the idea involving robotic 3D printing in the recycling process of plastic, it is possible, but then how to involve citizens in that and make them, empower them to be participating, and not only in the recycling part, but also in the making of furniture for their cities. For that, we have developed a project called Bring Your City that we were able to test in a full city in Thessaloniki, in Greece. There, we invited all the citizens of Thessaloniki to bring their plastic waste to us so that we can, let's say, recycle it and make street furniture that is customizable and be applied back in public space. To achieve that, we have developed an online design platform where citizens could log in and actually in 4 very simple steps, customize the new street furniture of the city, but also decide in which location to place the new furniture. I would like to show you a bit how we did that. This was the website that was inviting citizens to customize their furniture. So the first step of the decision making was to decide upon the shape of the furniture. And then to customize it, giving different functionalities. So it could be, for example, a bench that also has a bike rack, but also perhaps has, let's say, a tree on it. The last step for customizing this street furniture was to choose the color of it, giving 4 different options to that. And at the end, the user could not only see their design, but also learn how much plastic they would need to, let's say, recycle in order to produce this furniture for the city. We had this website online for 3 weeks, and within these 3 weeks, we collected 3,000 unique designs. By, let's say, collecting all these different opinions, we understood better what the citizens wanted for their city, but also what kind of, what amount of materials we would need in order to produce it. For the, so here you see a few of, let's say, the designs we have received, and on the, and also how we have translated them into, let's say, printable designs. But in order to collect the material, we needed also, let's say, a physical entity, a location in the city center, where we actually would invite the citizens to bring their plastic waste, but also let them participate in the full process of recycling. This was the entrance hall of the Zero Waste Lab. And here you see, let's say, the entrance hall, where actually we had a short exhibition explaining the properties of the material, why it is important actually to use this material in a thoughtful way, but also why it makes sense to recycle it. Because, of course, plastic is a material that has also advantages, like it's a material that is lightweight, it lasts for long, it is also cheap, but very often we use it in the wrong way, for example, in single-use applications that we use for a bit and then we discard it. And in that way, we create bulk amounts of materials that are discarded on a municipal level. So what we wanted to do is not only, let's say, create motivation for recycling plastic, but also let the visitors understand also the importance of changing our consumption patterns and actually use this material in a more thoughtful way. What created a very big impact to our visitors was also the possibility to see the full circle of the material from waste to product. Because by making transparent the recycling process of plastic, they could realize that actually it's something that it's a valuable material that can be formed again and again. And in that way, let's say, recycling makes sense. Especially in Greece, in Thessaloniki, there was a lot of skepticism about whether recycling takes place and whether, for example, even though there are recycling bins in various locations in the city, people often think that it doesn't make sense to recycle. And by making, let's say, this space in the city center, this production space in the recycling space, and making the recycling process transparent, it gave motivation to people to come in again and again to bring their plastic waste and give them a new shape and new life. The program lasted about 6 months, and during this period we were collecting and processing the material of the citizens. And at the end, we managed to implement 10 furniture pieces in public space in a central location in Thessaloniki, that were the shape, colors, and the extra functions of the furniture were shaped according to the 3,000 designs that we received earlier on that year. You see here different versions of our furniture that are, let's say, customized in order, for example, to host a dog feeder or a bike rack, but also a position for planters. What we are particularly proud of in this project is that actually we managed to close the loop of plastic waste literally locally within a radius of 15 kilometers. So the material was sourced, processed, and then 3D printed and implemented within the borders of the city. and in that way, let's say, actually bring, accommodate the locally, accommodate the concept of locally recycling plastic waste. So that was a bit our project. So to our view, by using new technologies like 3D printing, but also let's say these digital design tools, it gives us let's say a possibility to explore new concepts for recycling and thinking circular by involving citizens not only in the recycling but also in the decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Dany. It was super interesting to see you merge the participatory design processes together with the 3D printing to create impact for the city. I was amazed. So we are gonna move to the upcoming presentation. But before that, I would like to ask to my dear audience how they are. Are we alive? Give me some noise. Are you all sleeping? Where are you? The depth and the intensity of the conversations are seriously fascinating, but sitting in front of the screen all day could also be devastating. As Teyosh mentioned in the previous keynote, sitting is the new smoking, right? Maybe we need to stand up for a while. I would like to invite you to stand up and stretch for a little while if you would like to join me. I need that desperately, so whether you join me or not, I think I'm gonna do that quickly. So let me see who is joining me for that. So what we are gonna do is to shake our body parts for 10 seconds, right? First right hand, and then left hand, and then right leg, left leg, and the head. Here it comes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sorry, I needed that seriously. I hope it will be you as well. All right, we are continuing and moving to another inspiring speaker. We're gonna go with Dany Admis, an Iranian English creator and researcher based in Glasgow. She works across the interlinking fields of art, design, science, and technology. She is interested in the social and material entanglements that surface from extensively mapping worlds. So today, she will talk about the rise of smart ecological environments, rivers, forests, remote landscapes, and how this is changing the way we communicate, approach, and relate to the natural world. Dany, are you here?
Yes, hi.
Hi there.
Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. I'm also gonna just quickly jump straight in and try and stick to 10 minutes because I know that time is short. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So across the globe, our oceans, rivers, and forests are fast becoming hyper-connected ecological environments. They're always on, readily available, information-rich, interactive, machine-to-machine, and always recording. Animals carry sensors and collect data for scientists to remote parts of the world that they cannot reach. Drones mass plant seeds, satellites detect melting ice sheets, and cryptocurrencies manage services that ecosystems provide. So in tandem with more analog human conservation practices, smart ecosystems increase our connectivity, knowledge, participation in, and control of these areas. But this is not new, however. The West have had a relatively long relationship with using monitoring and tracking technologies and data as a way to construct an image or an idea of nature and the world. So on the screen, you can see that in 1735, Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus introduced a system and nomenclature into biology that classified all living things into two classifications, animals and plants. And this has become the foundation on which biological classification still rests today. In 1943, the infamous underwater explorer Jacques Cousteau developed a breathing regulator called the aqualung that allowed everyday people to go underwater and scuba dive and radically alter humans' relationship with the underwater world. And in 2020, I don't have a photo for it, but Dr. Leon Barron, who with his team at the Imperial College London, are currently monitoring micropolluting chemicals and pharmaceuticals that are found in the River Thames that come through the sewage system and that are excreted by Londoners. And they track the social patterns of this drug use and link them to wider social causes, such as the rise in London's depression and their use of antidepressants since the advent of Brexit. So you can see these world-making technologies have scientific, modern, and colonial roots, and they aid in the construction about truth about the world. So although fascinating, something the science doesn't help us gauge is the social and political consequences of these technologies and systems. How might these systems and technologies allow some to gain power and authority over others? And what inequalities are we putting in place unknowingly for the future? So I'm just going to talk, because I've got less than 10 minutes now, just about two works that I've commissioned recently, and then close with some reflections and remarks. Okay, so the first work I'd like to talk to you Tree Bore by the artist Maria Bozanovska-Jones. And this is a work I commissioned in 2018 as part of an exhibition I did on digital play and labour at Furtherfield Gallery in London. And this is a big collaborative project, and we had a co-creation lab that brought together artists and scientists and researchers to conceptualise ideas of digital play and labour. And Jones is really interested in the idea of the ways in which trees work for us. So trees clean the air we breathe, they work in symbiosis with mycorrhizal and fungal networks to talk to each other underground, they altruistically share resources, they provide cultural services in the form of shade and shelter for humans, and they've been proven to reduce our anxiety. So in collaboration with a postdoc researcher, Robert Gallagher, who looks into gaming and identity at King's College London, she decided to create a number of monologues for 3 different tree species found in Finsbury Park, which is where the gallery is. So each anthropomorphized voice tells the story of the work that tree bearers perform, right, instead of laborers. So you can listen to an ASMR relaxing Wood Wide Web beach who takes on the voice of a calming self-help guru. You can listen to a habitat oak talk about the logic of the gamification of all forms of life and work. And you can listen to an intellectual London plane pompously describing their work in an information economy. And when you listen to this piece, as you can see someone on the screen doing, these voices sound intimate and strange, other and familiar, and there's a couple of questions that I'd just like to pose to you. So if we valued or monetized the labor that trees do, would we make them work harder? Would we try to extract their labor as profit? And we could think about, current debates and conversations around 0 hours contracts, and, as we're all stuck at home. But also this we can think about feminist movement and feminist histories, about domestic labor and how it wasn't included in the economy. And a question that I think is quite close to my heart is, do we live in a world where we need nature to economically perform as a way to recognize its value? So the next work I'd like to talk about is called Declimatize by the designers Chris Verbken and Sasha Poflep. And as you can see, it's a long-term, it's a botanical installation, but it's a long-term one. And it's for a festival I commissioned in the Azores Islands in 2018. And the Azores are based in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in between Portugal and North America. And they're owned by Portugal. And they were a stopping off point for when Portugal was a great empire, or just an empire, sorry, when they would transport goods and plants, but also, unfortunately, people from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. The Azores was kind of like a big stopping off point. And the designers wanted to think about the colonial history of plants, how thousands of plant species were transported from, more tropical climates into Northern Europe for agricultural industries in the 17th and 18th centuries. And, the Azores itself sort of, because of its temperate climate and lots of rainfall, it became a place where wealthy individuals would call themselves botanists and create acclimatization gardens. So these gardens are like sort of botanical gardens now, which are ruins, but they were then acclimatization gardens with loads of experiments going on, and which mostly failed. These are mostly ideas of the future that failed. And so the designers thought, now under the effects of anthropogenic climate change, it could be claimed that islands themselves are thrown into a type of motion. In 100 or so years, we have no idea what geographical location the Azores will be in terms of climate. So they worked with a local climatologist who'd created a simulation model of what the climate will be like in the Azores Islands in 2100. So they found out the parameters of the weather and the precipitation, and then they spoke to lots of local botanists and gardeners and historians and selected a number of plants that thrive in this potential feature. And what you can see on the screen is a garden of these kind of future or predicted future, right? And I like to think of it as 25 square meters into this kind of predicted future. And the stones around the side of it plot out a sort of pixel shape because you can see it from the sky if you're a satellite. And what I think is really important about this work is it talks to us about the limitations of our ability to predict the future. And the designers really made it for not just humans, but more than humans. So this declimatization garden is actually to acclimatize birds and bees and insects into an anthropogenic future that, these animals didn't ask for, and we don't really know what it's going to be. So just to close quickly, what these artworks speak to us about is our shifting relationship to what we consider today as nature. They question the role of technologies and systems in the construction of nature, but they don't just deconstruct that myth, they also sort of help us rethink our relationships, our roles and responsibilities. And I believe that such new understandings of the world are prerequisites for change, right? On one hand, we cannot keep nature at a distance for adoration and inspection. Nature is no longer a remote mountain peak shining in the sun, but it's also not a place of, it's also not a site just for resource extraction. Nature is air pollution and is cloud servers, it is tide lines thickened with drift plastic, and it is chemical pollutants causing gender differences in animal taxa. Nature is biology and botany and carbon and silica and matter and ideas. And all of this is being organized by systems of technology and capital. This new nature entangles us in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. And I sort of pose a question of what stories should we be telling? So thank you. I hope that was 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Dany. It was super exciting presentation. You also opened new doors in my mind when I think in terms of nature and technology, and also like thinking in terms of nature labor. I think it's a concept that I just bump into very recently. Thank you. So we are moving on to our last speaker. I would like to invite Irini Papadimitrou. She's a curator and cultural manager who is drawn interdisciplinary and critical discourse to explore the impact of technology in society and culture and the role of art in helping us engage with temporary issues. She's currently a creative director at Future Everything, an innovation lab and arts organization in Manchester. Today, she will talk about how algorithmic systems are becoming essential bricks for building and reorganizing big parts of our society. So, Irini, are you with us?
Hello, thank you, Atilim, and thank you for the invitation to the event, Akis and your team. So I'll just quickly share my screen so that we can start. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, so as Atilim said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our work at Future Everything and my current curatorial research in exploring how our obsession with and accelerated adoption of algorithms in society and across different sectors, but also how these kind of systems makes us move towards seeing more and being seen through these filters. So I just wanted to start by sharing this piece, on exactitude in science, that I'm sure everybody knows very well, by Borges, which was presented as part of a travel book by a fictitious writer, Suarez Miranda, and is talking about an empire that has developed a very a very advanced study of cartography and cartographic science that, but also has ended up creating a map and cartography as vast as the empire itself. And the reason why I wanted to share that is that it's something that I usually go back to thinking about quantification and our obsession with recollection, but also with data collection, and also thinking about who we keep, like whose data is there and who is missing. These kind of questions were also explored in a project that we co-commissioned by artist Rafael Lozano-Hemmer and presented in Manchester last year in July 2019, and called Atmospheric Memory. And Atmospheric Memory takes as a starting inspiration and point the Charles Babbage and his treatise called the Ninth Bridgewater Treatise, where he, from 1800s, where he talks about the air as a library of collecting everything that we've ever spoken about and every action that has ever happened. And Charles Babbage, the same study, in the same treatise, he talks about a computer that will be powerful enough to rewind all this movement, all these words, all these actions in the atmosphere. And Raphael, with Atmospheric Memory, it was his attempt to try and materialize all this that is unseen, all these actions and data collection that and tracking that and quantification that is happening, and trying to materialize it in front of our eyes. So the installation would track people throughout, and then bring in front of you, from your voice to your movements and everything you were said. And thinking about quantification and thinking about like how this obsession, I wanted to share another like a quote, this time by Frantz Fanon, and in his very well-known Black Skin, White Masks, which is a quite influential book. And he talks about the loss of his identity as a black person, and how his identity is constructed by the white man. And this is something that we keep kind of moving towards in terms of like these systems that we're adopting, and without usually thinking like whose lives they affect. Facial recognition is one example of that datafication and quantification of the human. And one thing that makes me reminds me all the time is the past practice of physiognomy that has been very active and throughout the ages. But also has stayed so much alive, that inspired and was kind of adopted by criminologists and forensics, people like Alphonse Bertillon, for example, but also Cesare Lombroso in Italy in the early 20th century. And it's something that is coming back today through facial recognition systems. And Paolo Cirio, an artist whose work very often explores like critical ideas about these technologies and how these affect us, has just very recently, actually a couple of days ago, launched this initiative called Ban Facial Recognition Europe, to enable citizens across Europe to take part and also to engage in ideas around and issues around facial recognition, but also to enable them to lobby politicians to ban facial recognition eventually. And another work that we've been involved with and produced recently as well, and I wanted to bring up that also deals with these ideas of injustice and inequality, is Helen Knowles' Trickle Down and New Vertical Sovereignty. And in this piece, Helen Knowles is also questioning whether technologies could be used to as tools to for more egalitarian kind of societies. And in this case is exploring blockchain, and this artwork, which is a 4-screen audio and visual installation, which is comprised by this glass sculpture, which includes this coin machine. It's only activated when the visitor drops a coin into the coin machine, and then this not only enables the installation to start, but also it means that it splits into like micro payments, the money that has been received by the artwork, to pay everyone who has been behind the artwork, from the art workers, the gallery workers, but also the installation that is made by auctions that were partly staged by the artist, but also curated at like Sotheby's or the Ethereal Summit in New York. It means that everybody who's behind this is also getting like a payment, a micro payment. And one of the people who staged an auction with Helen was a group of prisoners in Liverpool. And this was also like part of the design of the piece, which involved other people from the finance sector, but also galleries and fintech as well, thinking about how a system like that might work, but also at the same time bringing the fact up that technologies, but also money, are not neutral in this case. And one element of the work that I found really interesting is also, which was part of the auctions as well, is the element of the spectacle itself. And it was also part of the blockchain enabled auctions, but also it's something that I find across when we think about technology and these systems and automation as well. And this is a picture that I took at an airport some time ago, which made me think immediately of Astra Taylor and her work and her term Foxtomation, which is a lot more appropriate to use rather than automation. And the reason why I'm saying that, and it's what Astra is kind of pointing us to, is the hidden labor force behind these machines and and KiwiBot, sorry for the interruption. And KiwiBot is just one example. This is a Colombian startup and company that create robots for food delivery robots. But actually what we don't see when we see the robot on the street do this cute kind of machine to deliver the food is the Colombian students who are behind the scenes and partly remotely and checks the robot and how it moves around, and they are paid $2 per hour, and it's really interesting. In Astra Taylor's work is putting questions like that, important questions about this hidden labor, and many, of course, other authors and scholars. And it's this type of Foxtomation that makes me think of less of futuristic scenarios, but more like these past inventions. In this case, this is the dumbwaiter at Monticello, which is was the residence of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the of the United States, but also the person who invented the dumbwaiter, which is basically a part of a furniture that is disguised, is hidden inside, behind a door, or like in this case, in the fireplace. And it's a space where the servants behind can place the dishes, and they can be invisible to the guests. And the servants, of course, are slaves, black slaves. And I just wanted to bring another art example. This is by Caroline Sinters, whose work was mentioned by Daphne earlier. And TRK, or Technically Responsible Knowledge, is a toolkit that Caroline created, and an advocacy initiative that she created in consultancy with workers behind these platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk or Crowdflower, etc. And this tool is not only revealing the unjust labor and the underpaid, and how underpaid and underpriced labor is in data training tasks in particular, but also creates a tool that workers can use to show how much the living wage needs to be and aligned with these tasks as well, and the calculator. And finally, just because I don't want to keep you more and also go over my 10 minutes, what can we do as art organizations or like art collectives? This is a program that we started at Future Everything. Actually, it's in collaboration with Midas, and we're curating it. And it's called Innovate Manchester. And it's a series of events, but actually action events. So conversations, but also labs where we bring together people from the business sector, tech industry, academia, health sector, etc., to try and understand the challenges and the issues, but also to try and create alternative ways of dealing with these issues. This was our most recent event called Data and Ethics, and the lab is about to happen in a couple of weeks. And more events will be following around sustainability and cities, but also health sector and AI. And with this, I just wanted to say thank you, and I hope I didn't go over my 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Irini. That was absolutely perfect. I'm going to let those participants who are registered for the online workshops go now, and those who are not participating in the workshops can stay and participate in some Q&A with the panel. If you are participating in the workshop, you should be able to join that automatically in a breakout room, and don't forget to fill in the evaluation form that will be put in the chat as well, please, before you go. We're very keen to find out how this has worked for you in order to be able to make changes for the future. So those workshops are a laboratory of care in the online world, making art with artificial intelligence, and live coding and computational creativity. So thank you very much for participating with us, and thank you also if you're one of our panelists or keynote speakers or facilitators and you now need to leave. Thank you very much for your contribution. So I'm now going to pass back to Atalim, who's going to manage some question and answers. If you have questions, please put them in capital letters in the online chat box, and Atalim will then facilitate this with the panel. Thank you, Atalim.
No worries. Yeah, as Anna said, if you have questions or comments, put them in the chat box in capital so we convey them to the speakers. While you are doing so, maybe I can start with asking questions to all panelists. I wonder, like, with the learnings we had throughout the history about human-to-human interaction and communication, we are creating new artifacts to interact with the machines, and those artifacts are generating a new version of humankind in every iteration. I wonder what we could learn from human to machine interaction and apply them to human interaction. What are the things that you think we could convey from machine to human interaction, human to human interaction? I would like to open this space for speakers to talk a little bit about this. If there is anyone to jump in. Dany?
Maybe I'll start then. Something that I'm trying to figure out that question really through my curating practice, and just sort of try to ask what kind of new ethics and values come out of this. I loved Daphne's comment about how actually it's about the world we create around these technologies, about which ways that we care for each other. And I think that's a really great way to think about it. It's about how we, interact with other people and what new ethics and values might happen. And I think machines take away some of that labor and allow us to maybe take up different positions of how we should care for others.
Amazing. Thank you, Dany. Any other ideas from other speakers?
Can I join in?
Sure.
Yeah, I would just like to say that maybe a classic worrying example of that can, let's say, exemplify in a way what you asked is in the case of, let's say, virtual assistants, the role of the voice and how users interact. So I kind of briefly mentioned it. What is, for instance, playing a great role is the role of commands, the imperatives. So all these imperatives that are being used to talk to a system like Alexa unavoidably influence, in a way, behaviors, or might influence behaviors within, let's say, a family or within a community of people somehow. I think, especially in the case of, let's say, the young users of these machines. So this is something that somehow I kind of think of often. And yeah, it's a question of how to respond to that and what one could think about that, like what would the alternative be there? Because we see the voice playing more and more of an important role in our interactions and affecting us. So it's more of a common question. I don't really have an answer.
Thank you, Daphne. Anyone would like to chime in? Irini?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what Dany and Daphne already mentioned, but yeah, just to reiterate and then just maybe add that all these kind of agents that technological agents that we've been adding, like we've been adding like an additional layer of complexity in terms of objects that we kind of, or yeah, people that we interact with, and it's really interesting, in particular, to see like the younger generations and kids who are growing up with being surrounded by agents like that, and how different behaviors are, as Daphne was saying, are kind of arising from these. And we definitely, and I don't have an answer or like something specific, but it's just more to say that we definitely need to start thinking about different frameworks, and from legal frameworks, but also ethical frameworks in terms of how we move forward and deal with these more complex relationships in society.
Great, thank you, Irini. So from the audience, do you have any questions to address to the speakers? Otherwise, we will move on. And I'm gonna hand over to Hannah.
Thank you very much, Atalim. And thank you, all of you, for such an interesting discussion. So this brings us to the very end of this part of the conference. I'd like to thank again our keynote speakers. You can check their presentation on YouTube. In fact, the whole of this conference will be sent to you directly in an email link later, so that you can catch up on bits that you've missed. I'd like to also thank the British Council, Atola, BIOS and Nova Iskra for organising this as part of the Connect Creativity project. Please check out their website if you haven't already done so. And do fill in the evaluation form that has been posted in the chat. Thank you all very much for your contributions. I do hope that you all continue these conversations for many, many months and years ahead. And I'm looking forward to the next event. Thank you very much, all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.